you don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who take on my hate. Look me better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper than
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 5th part of What If Deku Finds Ben's Watch Ultimatrix. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of the incredible Muffin on fanfictionnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Before heading home, Class 1 was brought to their homeroom, where Aizawa was waiting. Despite not doing anything but make the occasional comment, the man looked as exhausted as his students felt. "Don't worry, I won't hold you up for long," he sighed. "I just wanted to let you know that you have the next 2 days off. You'll come back on Friday. But it'll be a light day, mostly. You'll just spend some time looking over your options for hero internships." There was a collective sigh of relief. Even if they had to come back for a day in the middle of the break, they were all happy to get some time off to recover. Midoriya and his friends were slower to leave the classroom, out of consideration for Yaoyorozu and Shiro's injuries. Bakugou was the last to leave before them, to Midoriya's shock. Bakugou looked him straight in the eye and nodded almost imperceptibly, and then left. "Man, Tenya is gonna be sad that he missed all that," Ashido said, and then covered up a yawn. "I'm so tired. Ochako, can you make me weightless and carry me home?" When there was no response, Ashido turned. Ochako, the girl in question, was giving Asui a hard look, as if she was trying to figure something out. "Sue, are you okay?" Asui glanced around to make sure that only her closest friends would hear her. "About Tenya, Ribbit, I need to tell you what happened." Tenya smiled as his parents slept in their chairs, and his brother slept on the hospital bed. After everything he had been through that day, he was ready for some rest of his own. But even with the police outside, he just couldn't cease his vigil. He was almost glad when his phone vibrated in his pocket. He looked at it and realized that it was his messenger app. Sue must have told them. The sports festival must be over. I suppose I should face the music, as it were. All might. "Tenya, is your brother okay?" Tenya raised an eyebrow. "It's only Izuku. Glasses, my brother is going to recover. His injuries were severe, but not life-threatening. He will be discharged in about a week, and he will have to take a break from work for several more weeks." "Thank you for asking." "Glasses, I mean no offense, but I assumed that Sue told everyone, so I expected everyone to be messaging me." "All might, we're all right here, so I'm speaking for all of us. Ochako and Momo are worried sick. Hanta is freaking out because it was the hero killer. Sue feels guilty. And Mina wants to hit you for not telling us right away. She's also crying." "All might, she just hit me for that." Tenya smiled, touched by his friend's concern. "Glasses, I deeply apologize for not saying anything. But I had little information to go on at the time, and I did not wish to distract any of you from the sports festival." "How did that go?" The pause that followed lasted several minutes, to the point that Tenya wondered if he had said something to offend them. He was honest enough to admit that he wasn't the most socially adept person in the world, so he might have said something wrong without realizing. Finally, the messenger app began to ding again. "All might, sorry, Aizawa-sensei got mad at us and kicked us out of the classroom. Everyone is upset because the sports festival isn't important, your brother is." "All might, Mina hit me again, and I don't know why." Tenya made a note to bow to all of his friends for causing them such distress. "All might, Momo is trying to defend you because you didn't know the details. I think she's right." "All might, Mina tried to hit me again, but Ochako blocked her. Mina is now floating." Tenya fought hard not to laugh. "Glasses, once again, I apologize. I promise that I will not keep you out of the loop again. Obviously, I hope that something like this does not come up that requires such a predicament. But I make that promise all the same." "All might, Hanta just said that he can imagine you bowing as you say that. So can I." Mina is laughing, but I'm pretty sure she's going to hit you when she sees you. Speaking of which, Momo invited us all to her house on Sunday. Can you come? Glasses, I believe so. I will check with my family before then. Glasses, thank you for everything. I appreciate your kindness. Glasses, now, will someone please tell me what happened during the sports festival? After everything that had happened that day, Shoto felt both strengthened and completely drained. Finally, using his fire had felt like gaining something he had long missed, but there was still one more thing he had to do, before his newfound resolve possibly cracked. His sister, Fayumi, had been astonished when he asked where his mother was hospitalized. After all these years, he was finally going to see her. Fayumi had asked if Endeavor knew what the youngest Todoroki was planning. Shoto honestly didn't care, and so, despite how exhausted he was, he found himself outside a hospital room. He opened the door and saw a woman with snow-white hair staring out the window. She turned to him with shock in her eyes. "Shoto, hi, Mom." Izuku yawned as he walked up to the door. After everything he'd been through, both physically and emotionally, he was ready to do absolutely nothing for as long as possible. He opened the door, Izuku, and was immediately engulfed in a hug from his mother, followed by streams of tears that soaked his shirt. "Oh, Izuku," Inko sobbed as she half-dragged her son inside. "I'm so proud of you. You are absolutely amazing." Inko went on and on about everything she felt while watching the sports festival. Izuku tried to listen, but after a while, his mind began to wander. "I should really watch the rest of the sports festival before I go to sleep. I know I missed part of the second-year event, but I can probably catch the rest, and I really want to see how Mirio, Hato, and Amajiki do in the third-year events." "Izuku," Inko gently poked her son to get his attention. "Are you okay?" Izuku nodded tiredly. "Yeah, Mom, I'm just really tired. Do you want to go to sleep? I know you probably want to watch the rest of the sports festival, but..." Izuku rapidly shook his head to wake himself up. "No, I'm fine. I have a few friends in the third-year event, and I want to see how they do." "Okay, we'll compromise," Inko said with an understanding smile. "You take a nap, and I'll wake you up when the third-year event starts. And I've been recording the whole thing anyway." "Thanks, Mom." Izuku looked down at the Ultimatrix. "You too, Ben?" Ben materialized and raised an eyebrow. "What did I do?" For Izuku pointed to the Ultimatrix and then to the metal around his neck. "For everything." Ben smiled at him. "All I did was get you started. Everything else was all you, buddy." Izuku blamed the tears that followed on his exhaustion. The next day, Midoriya did almost nothing. He had recovered physically, but he was still emotionally drained. The only thing he did, which he made sure to do only after his mother left for work, was research. That wasn't unusual for him. He was always on the lookout for hero-related events on the news, or delving into obscure information about heroes that had retired or died long ago. Sometimes, however, he researched villains. They rarely received as much attention, since only the most dangerous remained at large for more than a few days. Today, Midoriya was researching one villain in particular, the hero killer, Stain. He had been active for a few months now, and had killed or severely injured nearly 4 dozen heroes and sidekicks. Honestly, Midoriya was amazed that someone so high-profile had not been the target of a massive hero-led manhunt much earlier. The problem, he quickly realized, was that Stain rarely stayed in one location for long. He would attack 3 or 4 heroes, and then vanish. It didn't take Midoriya long to map out Stain's attacks. The only commonalities between each location were that they had a high concentration of heroes, which made sense. Rural areas had never been hit. Midoriya also took notes on how the hero killer struck always in areas that favored close quarters combat, and always with a high-speed ambush. His attacks were always with blades, ranging from small knives to a jagged sword. Nothing he had found was new, if anything. He was just compiling notes from the many news reports he read. What had people stumped was Stain's quirk. It had something to do with paralysis, but nobody was sure how it worked. Thankfully, Ida had given him a clue. His brother had told him that Stain had ingested some of his blood, and that of his sidekicks. After that, none of them had been unable to move for several minutes. What interested Midoriya was that each victim had recovered at different times. He had asked Ida to tell him the exact order of who had been attacked, and who had recovered first. While he waited, he began to pace his room. There are a number of factors that could be at play, he muttered. It could be the amount of blood consumed, the number of successive uses of his quirk, or maybe blood type. Can I just say that any quirk that involves drinking someone's blood is creepy? Ben cut in from the Ultimatrix. Also, isn't there a quirk registry that would trigger some red flags, especially once Ingenium told the cops about this? Midoriya shrugged. Some quirks might have hidden effects some people don't know about, others evolve over time, and some people lie about their quirks, like I did. Point taken. Speaking of evolving quirks, I have something for you. Consider it a prize for doing so well in the sports festival. The Ultimatrix beeped, and the dial spun on its own. Check it out, a new alien. Midoriya looked at the hologram of the alien in question. It looked like a battery with tiny arms and legs, big eyes, and a smile full of crooked teeth. What's this one? He's called Buzzshock, and he's got all kinds of fun powers. Ben paused when Midoriya's phone buzzed. I'll give you the rundown later. Looks like Ida got back to you. Midoriya went over what Ida sent him about Ingenium's team. He compared the notes of who got attacked first versus who recovered first. Ida had also gone above and beyond by giving an estimate of how much blood each victim had lost. With that information, Midoriya was able to come to his best conclusion. Going by this, I'm almost positive that the effectiveness of Stain's quirk relies on blood type. I doubt Tenya could get me that kind of personal information, but I'll give him what I have. Hey, if it helps, it helps. Ben paused again, but Midoriya had a feeling he was shrugging. What about that vigilante who helped his brother? Any thoughts on him? Midoriya brought out a second notebook for just that purpose, but there was little written down. Nothing new there. Healing quirks generally work in one of two ways. Either they're like Recovery Girl's quirk and rely on the injured person's own stamina to recover, or the user's stamina is required, like a healing version of Hato's quirk. Aside from that, I don't have anything to go on. Well, it's something, Ben said. Better to have it and not need it, right? Right? Midoriya smiled as he held up the Ultimatrix. Now, about this buzzshock. All Might, hey guys, how is everyone? Comet, I'm good, Deku-kun. I had a really cool surprise when I came home. My parents visited me. All Might, wait, why did they visit? Don't you live with them? Comet, oh, I forgot to tell you guys. I live in an apartment while I'm at UA. It's easier than traveling all the way from home to school. Crayon, wow, so grown up. Ooh, maybe Tsu, yeah, Momo and I can visit for a girls' night. Tape, my fellow guys, I think we were just kicked out. Wanna see a movie or something? All Might, there's a theater that plays old pre-quirk superhero movies that I sometimes go to. It's cool to see how many abilities people could come up with before we actually had powers. Glasses, my brother is a fan of someone called Quicksilver. Do you know him? Izuku. Oh, and he is doing better and sends his regards to all of you. All Might, I know who he's talking about. Both versions are good. Frog, girls, we should start a separate chat for a ladies' night, Ribbit. We've lost the boys. Look, I'm conflicted. I want to have a girls' night out, but I am also a fan of Scarlet Witch. Comet, I have no idea who any of you are talking about. Crayon, All Might, first, to those of you who have never seen a Marvel movie, shame on you, and I will make you watch the entire franchise with me. Second, before Tsu creates a new chat, can I bring someone into our group? Comet, I get worried when Deku-kun gets assertive. Comet, also, yes. Snowflake, hello. Look, Todoroki-san. Crayon, hey. Yeah, Momo, you know the rules, first names only. Look, may we call you by your first name, Todoroki? Snowflake, that's fine. Wait, Izuku, you watch those old movies. All Might, do you? Snowflake, yes. My favorites are the Guardians of the Galaxy. Tape, didn't figure you for a comedy guy, Shoto. Snowflake, Drax is very relatable. Frog, okay, now we've lost the boys, Ribbit. When Friday rolled around, Midoriya was nervous. The schoolwork itself wasn't hard, but it was all a prelude to heroics. That was when the students would find out how many internship offers they got. After that, they would have the weekend to choose who to sign up with for a whole week. Everyone sit down, a bandage-free Aizawa said. This is important. Now, most years, we have a more even spread of internship offers, but a few of you made quite the impression. In addition, many of you likely received offers from the same agencies, so it's not as huge as you might think. Aizawa pressed a button, and a screen slid down from the ceiling. On that screen was a list of WANA students with a number of offers attached. Midoriya Izuku, 3,101. Todoroki Shoto, 2,582. Bakugou Katsuki, 1,033. Yaoyorozu Momo, 652. Ida Tenya, 437. Takoyami Fumikage, 202. Kirishima Ijiro, 106. Ashido Mina, 92. Uraraka Ochako, 58. Shirohanta, 50. Asui Tsuyu, 45. Those of you who aren't on the board, don't worry. You'll still have internships. There are a few dozen agencies that always take a student or two. All of you have access to those agencies if you want, but those of you on the board were specifically selected. Choose carefully. Midoriya barely heard him. He was too focused on his name at the top of the list. Over 3,000 agencies had offered him an internship. How was he supposed to choose just one? Guys, look at that. Uraraka was bouncing in her seat. We all got offers. People want us. Ida nodded. It is an honor to receive so many offers, despite only reaching the second round. Yaoyorozu had one hand over her mouth and looked to be on the verge of tears. Over 600 offers, I can't believe it. Ribbit, I'm just glad I got any, Asui said. I lost so easily, so I was kind of worried. Same here. Shiro grinned at her. Still, we all got something, and in our first year, too. Just a few more and I would have broken 100. Ashido's smile was wide, but she still managed to sound disappointed. Maita, who had initially been peeved that he hadn't received any offers of his own, noticed something odd. Hey, how come Bakugou didn't get more offers? He came in second place. Kaminari, who sat next to him, smirked. We all saw how brutal he was during the whole sports festival. I guess a lot of agencies didn't want someone like that. Bakugou sneered. If they're scared of me, then they ain't worth my time. Before I hand out your offers, there's something else you need to do. Aizawa sighed. You'll be going out into the field, which means that you'll need hero names. The class immediately cheered, only to go silent when Aizawa's eyes glowed and his hair rose. However, be very careful about what you choose, because if it's something you end up hating, you'll regret it. The door slammed open and Midnight walked in with a wicked smirk. Plenty of heroes choose names that they think are good, only to realize later that they're awful and try to change them. But everyone already know them by the name that they hate. Aizawa nodded, and then handed out whiteboards and markers. I'm not really that good with this sort of thing, so Midnight will be evaluating your choices. You don't have to listen to her advice unless your choice is offensive, but I suggest you take what she says to heart. Most of the students whispered to each other, sharing their ideas and offering suggestions for changes. For his part, Midoriya stared blankly at his whiteboard. For years, he'd fantasized about being a hero, and what his name would be. Most of his ideas had started out as homages to All Might. Recently, he'd thought of a few names that were based around the Ultimatrix. However, none of them really felt right. What's a good hero name? I've only ever been called by my real name, or a name came to mind. At first, it had been a source of pain and ridicule, but then someone wonderful had given it new meaning. When he thought about it in its new context, it felt good. It felt like a name he could be proud to have. With that in mind, he put his marker against his board, but at the last second, he added in one more thing. He had the name of who he was, but he also added what he wanted to become. It didn't hurt that Ben appeared, looked at what he had written, and grinned. Even with the time it took to get feedback from friends, it didn't take long for the rest of the class to come up with their own names. Most of them had likely had names in mind for years, so it wasn't very surprising. The names themselves were a mixed bag at first. Some, like Ajiro's Tailman, made sense, but others, like Aoyama's I Just Can't Stop Twinkling, were politely but firmly asked to be reworked. In the latter's case, he came up with Twinkling Knight, which was acceptable. Kirishima caught Midoriya's attention with his chosen name. He knew about Crimson Riot, and he was excited to discuss with the newly dubbed Red Riot the hero who inspired him. Another that was rejected was Bakugou's choice. He held up his board and proudly called out his name. Lord Explosion Murder. There was silence, and then Midnight shook her head. No. What? Why not? It's awesome. It has murder in it. Either take that out, or come up with something completely different. Bakugou mulled it over for a second, then crossed out his first choice and wrote down Ground Zero. Better, Midnight said. Still aggressive, but it doesn't feel like a death threat. Bakugou scowled and went back to his seat. Todoroki was next, and his choice was a bit confusing. Okay, why Triumph? Midnight asked. Todoroki shrugged. My father is Endeavor. His name literally means trying or effort. I want to be a better hero than him, so I chose a name that meant success. Just do your best to live up to your name, Midnight advised. Midoriya wondered about Todoroki's hero name. He knew his new friend wanted to lead a life without Endeavor hanging over his head, so he'd thought Todoroki would pick something completely unrelated to his father. Maybe he was trying to show that he could take everything he had suffered and make something positive out of it. Now, the rest of UAS Rising Stars began coming to the front of the room. Sui was first, and she looked confident. I've had this name in mind since middle school, she said, and held up her sign. The rainy season heroine, Froppy. Midnight clapped her hands together. Oh, that's adorable. Ciro's tape hero, Cellophane, was also approved. As was Uraraka's Uravity, it might have just been a combination of her name and gravity. But Midoriya liked it. Ida held up his sign with pride. The boost hero, Virtus. Midnight cocked her head. My Latin is a bit rusty. Care to explain? Ah, my apologies. Ida adjusted his glasses. Ingenium, my brother's hero name, translates to ingenious. It is a name that has been used in one way or another for several generations in my family. However, since both my brother and I will be active heroes at the same time, I have chosen a name that can mean courage and reliability, traits I see as the most important in a hero. Perhaps, when my brother retires, I may take the name Ingenium for my own, but until then, Virtus will be the name of a hero my family can be proud of. Very nice, Midnight complimented. And thank you for the explanation. Ashido jumped out of her seat next, though she patted Ida on the shoulder as she ran up to the front and showed off her name. The pink heroine, Alien Queen. Midnight frowned. I'm not sure if Alien Queen will send the right message. Some people might think of a certain movie franchise instead of a heroine. Ashido grinned at her. First, I love those movies. Second, that's why I put in the title. People are more comfortable if they're told that someone is pink. It makes them feel safe. Okay, that shows some depth that I hadn't thought of, Midnight admitted. Yeah, Momo helped me. Ashido waved to the class president, who smiled and waved back. So, can I keep the name? Fine, go ahead. Midnight pointed at Yaoyorozu. Since you got called out, do you mind coming up next? Of course, Midnight-sensei. Yaoyorozu brought up her board, which she'd written on with perfect kanji. The creation heroine, Genesis. Ooh, so elegant. Yaoyorozu blushed at the compliment and then went back to her seat. Midoriya leaned over to whisper to his friends. Those are all great names. Uraraka beamed. Thanks, Deku-kun. You're up next, right? Yeah, I'm the last. Midoriya took a deep breath and then got up. He walked to the front of the class and held up his sign. There were murmurs of confusion, even from some of his friends. Are you sure about that, Midoriya? Midnight looked concerned. The first part is bold, and I like that, but the actual name. I know, Midoriya said. When I was young, this name was the worst insult to me. It really hurt to hear anyone say it. But then someone came up with a different way to look at it now. Whenever someone sees it, I want them to think of a hero who can do anything. Uraraka stared at Midoriya's sign with glistening eyes. She'd had no idea that something she'd said to justify a cute nickname had impacted him so deeply. Now, it would be more than a nickname. It would be the name of a hero. The ultimate hero, Deku. The students were allowed a few minutes to talk amongst themselves. Midoriya tried not to blush when Uraraka gave him a quick hug and failed miserably. Still, no one teased him and even let him change the subject to the others' hero names. Your name was awesome, Todoroki, he said to the boy in question. But, no offense, I thought you wanted to be different from Endeavor. Todoroki shrugged. It's like you said, back in the sports festival, it's my quirk, my life, and I get to decide what to do with it. I decided that I want to be better than Endeavor. I want to be a great hero not because he wants me to be, but because I want to be. His smile was tiny, but it was there. Also, thanks for including me before. I'm not used to having friends. Midoriya's smile was bright. Trust me, you'll love it. Just don't give me a nickname. No promises if I come up with something cute, Ashido said. Uraraka calls Midori Deku-kun, and it's adorable. I was wondering about that, Todoroki said. I like the name, Midoriya. Thanks. Midoriya spotted their homeroom teacher climbing out of his sleeping bag. I guess it's time to see who gave us those offers. Aizawa started handing out sheets of paper to each student. Some received large stacks. Midoriya could barely see over his. You've got the rest of class and the weekend to look over your offers and select one, Aizawa said. It would be a good idea to mark a few, in order of what you want, occasionally. Agencies withdraw their offers at the last second, in case something comes up. Since that's a possibility, better to send in your choices sooner than later. The offers were organized by their national rankings, from highest to lowest. The students with more than one page generally focused on the top pages, and excited exclamations began to echo through the room. Oh, cool. Ashido held up her paper and waved it in Uraraka's face. The highest ranking offer was already circled. Look, I got an offer from Sky Dancer. She's in the top 30. Wow. Uraraka shared a fist bump with the other girl. Hey, Deku-kun, what kind of offers did you get? There was no answer. Deku-kun, Bakugou made the whole class jump as he leapt to his feet. I got an offer from Best Jeanist. How do you like that, Deku? The number 4 hero chose me. Deku, hey. More and more people started to turn in Midoriya's direction. The boy was trembling in his seat as he stared at his top offer. Well, he managed. Finally, he held out his paper, though not to anyone in particular. Todoroki was the one who took it, and when he read the top name, his eyes widened. Wow, impressive. Ashido gave him a look. You don't shut down like that for an impressive. Gimme that. She snatched the paper from him. As soon as she read the name, she almost dropped it. Holy crap. Midori, you got an offer from Hawks. The class went silent. Hawks, the number 3 hero. His rise through the ranks had been nothing short of meteoric, and at only 22 years old, he was one of the youngest heroes to make it into the top 10, and the youngest to make it into the top 3. Yaoyorozu briefly put her arm around Midoriya's shoulder in a sort of half-hug. That's an incredible honor. Midoriya nodded slowly. Why, hey, did you get any interesting offers? Yes, I was surprised by mine. Yaoyorozu held up her top page. I received an offer from Ryukyu. Whoa, the number 9 hero. That's awesome. Uraraka was very careful not to let her smile fade. She was genuinely happy for all of her friends, but sometimes, seeing Yaoyorozu getting so close to Midoriya made her stomach twist into knots. She tried not to dwell on it, After all, Midoriya and Yaoyorozu were good friends, and she was good friends with both of them. She wasn't jealous or worrying that they might fall in love and forget all about her. She was jolted out of her spiraling thoughts when Asui tapped her arm. So, Ochako, do any of your offers look good, Ribbit? Uraraka couldn't be sure, but she thought there was a knowing gleam in Asui's eyes. A few, she said. I'll have to look up some of them, though. Asui nodded. Hey, Midoriya, can you help with that, Ribbit? You probably know every name on her list. Finally, Midoriya snapped out of the last of his stupor. If anything, he looked relieved. Sure, I could probably help compare each agency's popularity with their notable achievements, so you can find the best balance of attention and work done. Zero chuckled, because of course he would know that off the top of his head. Yaoyorozu sat next to Todoroki. Were there any offers that caught your eye? A few, Todoroki admitted, but most of these are probably because my father is Endeavor. Too bad for them, I'm taking an internship with him. Midoriya's head snapped around so quickly he almost got whiplash. What? Why? Simple. Todoroki held up his left hand. I've been neglecting how to use my flames. If I want to be a hero, I need to be able to use both parts of my quirk as well as possible, and Endeavor is the best fire quirk hero out there. Midoriya couldn't argue with that logic, and Todoroki did seem at ease with his decision, so he didn't try to fight it. I wonder who I should pick, he muttered. Zero gave him the most incredulous face he'd ever seen. Dude, why are you even asking? Hawks offered an internship. You take that and don't look back. Well, I still want to go through all the other offers. Ashido rolled her eyes. You can look, but if you even think about accepting anyone else, I will darn it. I can't threaten someone so adorable. Ochako pouted him or something. Uraraka blushed, but then surprised everyone by tilting her head up at him, sticking out her lower lip, and giving the most pitiful expression any of them had ever seen. Come on, Deku-kun, she said. Please. Midoriya, red-faced and sputtering, just circled Hawk's offer. Oh okay. Ashido leaned over to Asui. So, that was the cutest thing in the world, right? Yep, Ribbit. Okay, enough of that. You need to pick an internship, Froppy. Well, since you already picked one, Alien Queen, maybe you can help me, Ribbit. Sure thing. Ashido turned back to the resident hero expert. Hey, Midori, after you help Ochako, help me help Tsu, okay? Midoriya had already pulled out a fresh notebook. No problem. Unlike most students, Midoriya didn't get the entire weekend off. He came back on Saturday for his weekly training session with the Big Three, though before they started, there was a round of congratulations. That's so awesome, Izu-kun. Hado held up her own bronze medal and grinned. I'm just glad that I finally made it to the final round of a sports festival. But you won on your very first try. She pouted in Amajiki's direction. Maybe I could have made it to the finals if someone hadn't fought so hard in the semifinals against me. Amajiki suddenly found the floor very interesting. Unfortunately, he still got an eyeful of his silver medal. I just wanted to prove that I could do well. I still lost to Mirio. Now Hado pouted at the last member of the Big Three. Yeah, did you see him, Izu-kun? He practically walked through almost every part of the sports festival. Midoriya thought back to one fight, where Tagada had phased through every defense his opponent had come up with. Tagada had ended up naked, but he still won. Literally, I think. He still couldn't stop blushing every time Hado called him by her new nickname for him. He suspected that was why she used it in the first place. Tagada laughed. Yeah, that new strength and speed made it a little unfair, huh? He threw an arm around Amajiki's shoulders. Sorry about that last punch, man, but you just kept getting back up. And that porcupine crab combo almost hit me at the end. Amajiki failed to hide the embarrassed smile on his face. Thanks. Anyway, Midoriya, you got your internship offers, right? Did you get any interesting ones? Why yeah. Midoriya grinned. From Hux, the Big Three froze and stared at him. Up in the observation room, Gran Torino made a noise that sounded like a surprised grunt. Damn, that's impressive. Most first years don't get picked by heroes in the top 10, unless I've missed something lately. Nezu laughed. Actually, Midoriya-san's class had plenty of offers from the best. Todoroki-san is interning with Endeavor. Bakugo-san was selected by Best Genist. Takoyami-san was given an offer by Edshot. And Yaoyorozu-san. Night-Eye raised an eyebrow when Nezu trailed off. The girl who can create objects. Her planning and skill were evident. Who did she accept an offer from? Ryukyu. Nezu shrugged when the three men blinked. It seems the Dragoon hero is taking on more interns lately. All of the students who made it into the final event had interesting offers, Allmight added, and then looked down at the students wistfully. Right now, I only have one regret about becoming a teacher and passing down one for all that I can't take those four on as interns myself, or eventually bring them in as official psychics. Could you imagine what we could accomplish as a team? All Might's former teacher and student allowed themselves to be lost in possibilities for a moment, until Night Eye shook his head. As idyllic as that sounds, that opportunity has passed. Now, it is Mirio's turn to shoulder the responsibility as the future symbol of peace, and all the others in his generation will be inspired to shine as brightly. Nezu kept his thoughts on that matter to himself, while he appreciated All Might for all that he had done for society over the last 3 decades. There were some parts of the man's ideology that he disagreed with. In his opinion, the humans had become too dependent on All Might to save them. A single pillar could too easily fall if too much weight was placed on top of it. It was far safer to balance a load on multiple pillars. That was why he placed so much emphasis on his teachers to not let some students fall to the wayside in favor of those with powerful quirks. That was another reason why he had the big 3 training together as often as possible, and why he had included Midoriya. The hero industry encouraged competition to improve individual growth, but there were times suppressed by the government. But Nezu knew it happened when heroes placed their own success so far ahead of everything else that they sometimes sabotaged each other. In those times, criminals could escape, and innocent people would suffer. Nezu had seen those cracks start to widen in recent years, and hoped to create a better example with this generation. He allowed himself to feel a tiny bit guilty for manipulating the students like that, but if it created strong bonds and promoted cooperation, he would bear it happily. When Sunday came around, the rising stars, including their newest member, gathered at the Yaoyorozu home. Uraraka, Shiro, and Ida were the only ones who hadn't submitted their choice of internships, and everyone else wanted to make sure they were ready. Midoriya had also asked Yaoyorozu for a favor, and she had gladly granted it. Okay, Deku-kun, I think I've made my choice. Uraraka held out one of her papers. The battle hero, Gunhead. Midoriya's eyes sparkled, and he pulled out a notebook, one of 20 he'd brought with him in his backpack. That's a great choice. He might only be in the top 40. But he has a flawless record when it comes to combat-related missions. He's also one of the best freeform martial artists in Japan, and has commendations from a dozen police precincts. Uraraka blinked and leaned against him to get a better look at his notebook. Wait, really? I looked him up and I know he's good, but wow. Yeah, the only reason he isn't higher on the rankings is because he's more about working with the police than doing much advertising. Midoriya flipped a page. Oh, and his quirk is called Gatling. He has gun-like organs on his arms that can fire keratin bullets, but they're more effective at closer range. Since you both have quirks that require you to get closer, he'll be a great teacher. Wait, I thought you wanted to be a rescue hero, like 13. Shiro idly scratched at his scar. Why would you want to sign on with a battle hero? Uraraka shrugged. Between the USJ and the sports festival, I know that I'm just not that good at fighting right now. Even if I want to focus on rescuing people, I'll probably have to fight someone at some point. I'd rather I actually win when that happens. An excellent idea, Ochako. Ida started chopping at the air excitedly. It is always wise to improve on your weaknesses. I don't suppose you have a notebook on Ryukyu? Yaoyorozu asked. There is plenty of information on her that is publicly available, but you might know something that most don't. Sure thing. Uraraka had grabbed the arm holding the notebook with Gunhead's information to hold it steady, so Midoriya used his other hand to rifle through his backpack and found the right notebook. Here you go. Everyone briefly shared knowing smiles. Midoriya was a bit red-faced, but he hadn't tried to free his arm. Uraraka, on the other hand, didn't seem to realize what she was doing at all. What about you, Hanta? Asui grabbed Shiro's papers, and then fended off his hands with her tongue when he tried to take them back. Did you decide on anyone yet, Ribbit? Well, I want to focus on heroes that specialize in mobility, he said, even as he tried to get around Asui's tongue. Air Jet is on that list. Wait, what? Midoriya's head snapped around to look at him. I'm a huge fan of Air Jet. His agency used to be in my neighborhood, before he moved. I wish you'd told me about this earlier. I have an entire notebook on him. Shiro grinned. Sorry, dude, I didn't even consider him at all until last night. Do you think you could email me those notes? It'll have to be kind of late, but I can do it. Huh. Todoroki tapped his chin. I think Endeavor worked with Air Jet a few days ago. Something about a drug bust. If it helps, I could probably get any recent news about him. Shiro held out one hand for a high five, which was tentatively returned. That is so cool. Okay, I'm definitely signing on with him. All of your choices are pretty inland, Ribbit. Asui was as close to pouting as anyone had ever seen. I chose Selkie for my internship, and he works off the coast. I mean, I figured we wouldn't see each other during the internships, but I guess I'm so used to spending time with you all, Ribbit. Don't worry, Ashido said and hugged Asui. See, they have these awesome inventions called cell phones. We can even video call. Asui ducked her head. Right? Sorry. She noticed that Shiro was staring at her and she smirked. Ribbit. Shiro, slowly and deliberately, put his head in his hands. Todoroki shifted closer to Yaoyorozu. Is this sort of thing normal? I don't want to assume. Yaoyorozu smiled, but didn't look up from her reading. Nina isn't teasing anyone about potential romance, so this is actually quite mild. Todoroki glanced at Midoriya and Uraraka, who were back to reading the notes on Gunhead and talking quietly. What about? I'm fairly certain that they either haven't recognized their feelings or are too afraid to say anything yet. Her smile turned a tiny bit mischievous. Besides, if something does happen between them, it will absolutely adorable. I'm starting to wonder if everyone here is a little bit crazy, Todoroki thought. Still, everyone is being so open. It's nice. What about you, Tenya? Yaoyorozu asked. Have you chosen an agency? Ida nodded. I was originally going to choose my brother's agency, but that will not happen now for obvious reasons. Instead, I believe that I will accept the invitation from Manuel. Midoriya perked up. The normal hero. He's a great choice. Lots of people like him because he's so approachable. His agency is in His agency is in Hasu. Everyone paused and turned towards Ida. Even Todoroki, who had only found out about the attack on Ingenium through the news, looked concerned. Tenya, dude. Shiro grabbed the other boy by the shoulder. Please tell me you aren't going to do something stupid. Ashido bit her lip. Yeah, I know that your brother was hurt, but you aren't planning on picking a fight with the hero killer, are you? Ida was quiet for a worryingly long time before answering. I do not know. My brother would not approve, nor would my parents. And we certainly do not. Yaoyorozu cut in. For the first time, she looked genuinely angry and looked ready to throttle Ida. Tenya, you are one of the most responsible people I know. Chasing after someone who has maimed and killed dozens of heroes is a horrible idea. Ida leaned back in his chair. I know, but he looked down at his hands and then back up at them with anguish in his eyes. I'm just so angry. Stain hurt my brother, the person I respect more than anyone else, a hero who has done nothing but help others. And it was only luck that kept him from being permanently crippled. How should I act? To everyone's surprise, it was Todoroki who responded first. I know how you shouldn't bottle up all that anger. Believe me, I've spent years doing that, and it didn't go well. Try to find some way to release that anger that isn't going to send you into a death match with a serial killer. That is sound advice, Ida admitted. But I fear that I will not have any sort of closure until the hero killer is behind bars. And you want to be the one who puts him there, Todoroki guessed. When Ida nodded, he sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. If I tell you guys something, can you promise not to spread it around? Everyone nodded, so he continued. I spoke to my old man about my internship with him. Apparently, we're going to Hasu for that week. It looks like Endeavor wants to be involved with hunting down the hero killer. Endeavor may be a bastard, but he's good at his job. If he finds Stain, I'm sure he'll stop him. Hasu will be on high alert after Stain's attack on Ingenium, Midoriya added. Heroes from all over will flood the streets to find him, and each attack has drawn a bigger manhunt. He will get caught, Tenya. By now, confronted with one logical reasoning after another, Ida started to relax. I still want to intern with Manuel. At the very least, it is my duty to pick up where Ingenium left off and help keep Hasu safe. Just don't forget that you won't be alone out there, Yaoyorozu said kindly. Heroes and the police will be doing everything they can to bring Stain to justice. Finally, Ida smiled. There was pain and frustration there, but it was no longer overwhelming. Thank you. With that, the tension dropped, and Uraraka let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Please, Tenya, remember that we're here for you. If you need anything, we'll be there. Right, everyone? Heck yeah. Ashido jumped over to Ida and hugged him. Us rising stars have to stick together. We'd be a terrible constellation if we fell apart, Shiro added, and got a high five from Ashido for the joke. Yaoyorozu smiled at everyone and clapped her hands together. Say, why don't we take a break for now? Izuku and I have a surprise for you all. Eager to leave the dreariness behind them, they followed Yaoyorozu to another part of the mansion, specifically the in-home theater. It looked just like a regular movie theater, but instead of individual seats, there were several large couches. We don't have too much time before everyone needs to go home, Yaoyorozu continued, but there's still enough time left to watch the first movie. Uraraka looked at the tall girl, and then at Midoriya, who was smiling. First movie of what? The longest connecting cinematic universe ever, Midoriya said, and then shared a fist bump with Shiro, who had figured out what was happening. I'll set up the movie and have snacks brought in. Yaoyorozu headed over to a projector in the back. I hope you enjoy Iron Man. By the time the movie was over, Uraraka was sure of two things. First, that Midoriya and Yaoyorozu were both secretly huge movie nerds. Second, she needed to speak with the support department about adding thrusters to her costume. In the shadows of Hasu City, a man crouched on a rooftop, looking down at the streets below. His black clothes were rugged and worn, while his white mask and red scarf were dirty and more than a little ragged. He had more than a dozen knives strapped to his body, and a jagged katana slung over his back. To the casual observer, he looked like trouble. To anyone who knew who he was, they had a good reason to turn around and pretend they never saw him. Stain brushed his unkempt hair out of his eyes, which focused on the tiny figures moving around on the streets. He knew his time in Hasu was limited. Every time he made a move, more and more heroes flocked to his latest hunting ground to find him. He sneered. So far, none of the people he'd attacked deserved to call themselves heroes. Those who were misguided or unfit for the role, he left alive, but unable to tarnish society further. The ones who were little more than glory hounds had a much more severe punishment in store. Stain shifted his sword to a more comfortable position, and then leapt to another rooftop. The night was young, and there were so many opportunities in store. All right, everyone, listen up. Aizawa looked as tired as ever, but no one thought for a second that he wouldn't notice any fooling around. You've all been given your train tickets to where you'll be interning. As soon as you get there, text me that you've arrived safely. I know when all of you are supposed to get off your trains, and if I don't hear from you within an hour after that, I will call the police. Understood? Yes, Aizawa-sensei. Class 1 of course, no one was willing to make a joke about something so serious. It was Tuesday, the day after every internship selection had been submitted. No one had been rejected by their first choices at the last second, but it was only now that it was starting to sink in they were so close to being pro-heroes. Also, you've all been given your costumes and support items, but you will only wear them with your mentor's permission. This is a gesture of trust, so don't betray it. Midoriya looked down at the case that held his costume. He really only needed the Ultimatrix, and that was stuck to his arm, but the responsibility still weighed heavily on him. Okay, the trains are starting to pull in. Aizawa looked at his phone. I'll stay here until you're all off. Work hard, and listen to everything your mentor has to say. Don't waste this opportunity. Some of the class broke off quickly to get to their trains, while others waited. Through some twist of fate, the rising stars all had to wait an extra few minutes. Good luck, everyone, Midoriya said nervously. You too, Midori. Ashido hugged him with one arm, while nearly giving Shiro a concussion as she waved her costume case around with the other. Don't do anything crazy without us, okay? Oh, so we can act crazy as long as we're all together. Shiro grinned. Good to know. Ashido looked thoughtful for a moment. Well, Yamomo and Midori are the ones responsible for the class, so I guess they have to stay all in charge and stuff. The rest of us can go nuts. Yaoyorozu rolled her eyes. That explains so much. Your train is pulling in, though. See, this is why I can goof off while you're around. Ashido winked at her, and then dashed to her train, waving back as she ran. See you guys in a week. Love you. Hey, Ida. Midoriya waited until his friend was looking straight at him. Remember what we talked about on Sunday, right? Ida nodded. I promise not to do anything reckless. And if I need to talk, I know I can reach out to any of you. That's good to hear. Midoriya spotted another train pulling in. That one's mine. See you guys on Monday. Have fun, Deku-kun. Uraraka gave him a quick hug. We'll do our best to get those autographs for you. Midoriya blushed. Yesterday, in a fit of hero enthusiasm, he had asked his friends if they could bring back autographs from their mentors. Thanks. Midoriya hugged her back, and then headed for his train. Bye. As he sat down in a free seat, he noticed more than a few other passengers sneaking glances at him and whispering. Between his quirk and winning the sports festival, he had been receiving plenty of attention. At least no one was crowding around him, like they had on his ride to school for the last 2 days. He had just started to get comfortable when his phone buzzed, and Ben appeared next to him. Okay, if it's Uraraka again, you might as well just ask her out. You two are practically dating already. Midoriya turned to the window to hide his blush, not that it mattered to Ben. He could see everything from the Ultimatrix. The hologram was just for show. The worst part was that he couldn't argue with Ben, since it would look like he was talking to the empty air. It had nothing to do with the fact that Midoriya did have a tiny crush on Uraraka, really. To distract himself, he opened up his phone. To his simultaneous relief and disappointment, it wasn't Uraraka, but his other messenger group, Big 3+1. The 3 other avatars were a star, a firefly, and a cartoon stomach. Star, hey, freshman. You on your way to Hawk's agency? Which one is it? As a hero capable of reaching almost anywhere in Japan relatively quickly, Hawks had buildings in most major cities, though his primary agency was in Kyushu. Midoriya had been told which one to go to, though he had memorized each location anyway. Allmight, the one in Tokyo, and I just got on the train. Firefly, good luck, Izukun. Allmight, thanks, Nejire. Stomach, I don't think I could handle interning under any hero in the top 10. I feel queasy just imagining it. Allmight, I think I'm nervous enough, Tamaki. Firefly, aw, I wish I could give you a big hug to calm you down, Flying Buddy. Wait, would that cute friend of yours with the brown hair get jealous? Are you two dating? I need a boyfriend so we can go on a double date. By this point, Midoriya's face had gotten so hot that he wondered if he would spontaneously turn into Heat Blast. Ben just read the texts and laughed. The Hawks Agency Tokyo branch could have easily been mistaken for any other 20-story building if it hadn't had the hero's name over the door, framed by a pair of red wings. It was almost humble again if it wasn't 20 stories tall. He has more than one of these, Ben asked, a little incredulously. This one is the biggest, Midoriya said quietly. I think most of it is housing for people who have to spend a few days in the city on business. So it's a hotel. Kind of. Midoriya swallowed nervously. I guess I should go in. It's either that, or you stand outside for a week. Ben made a shooing motion. Hurry up. I want to see this. Midoriya stepped through the door, and his first thought was that Ben was right. It could have been mistaken for a hotel lobby. At the center was a desk, behind which was a young woman with short brown hair and a kind smile. Hello, she called out and waved him over. Are you Midoriya Izuku, by chance? Why, yes, ma'am. Midoriya bowed. Oh, please don't call me that. The woman made a face. It makes me feel old. I'm Takeda. I work the front desk and sometimes help out Hawks in the field. Midoriya blinked. Oh, why, you're one of his sidekicks, Takeda-san. For almost a year. Takeda smiled proudly. Please, follow me to Hawk's office. He's expecting you. She led him to an elevator and waited until it closed before speaking. So, the winner of the sports festival, huh? I'll bet that was something. I went to Ketsubatsu, so we didn't do anything like that. Why, yeah, it was something. Midoriya scratched his head and looked away. Takeda giggled. You're adorable, Midoriya-kun, but that only gets you so far. Girls like a bit of confidence. Her giggle turned into a full-blown laugh when Midoriya blushed and tried to cover up his face. Oh, you're going to be so much fun. Too bad I'm on the clock, so I need to tell you the basics. Hawks bought this building, but only remodeled the top 4 floors. It was expensive, but he made it all back pretty quickly with all the people who stay here. It's also a good buffer to keep out his fans. Why did he buy such a tall building? Takeda laughed again. He likes to joke that it's so he can look all dramatic by standing on the roof as the sun comes out. But I think it's because of his quirk. He's got more bird mannerisms than you'd think. Back on track. The actual agency part of the building has rooms for employees and work-related guests, like you, a training area, and areas for hero-related business. Sometimes, clients need a bit of privacy, so Hawks even had one room soundproofed. Oh, about your room, don't unpack just yet. Hawks goes all over the country, so it's possible that he just wanted to impress you before taking you to where you'll actually do your internship. Ben, leaning against the wall next to Midoriya, raised an eyebrow. Consider me impressed. Midoriya coughed to hide a laugh. Well, I don't think he'll have to try much harder to impress me. The elevator dinged, and then the doors opened to not what Midoriya was expecting at all. Instead of a traditional office or professional workplace, there were a few beanbag chairs scattered around, a television in the corner, and a small desk that held a computer. The room had only a single occupant, who had his back turned. He looked out through the tinted windows that made up one wall. His arms were crossed, and he had an aura that suggested he didn't want to be disturbed. Takeda, however, did just that. Hey, boss, quit acting all broody, I know you're faking. Hawks immediately slumped and turned around. Aw, come on, Yuki. I was trying to look all awesome for the new intern. Takeda rolled her eyes. The kid's already a bundle of nerves. You're just going to make it worse. The number 3 hero in Japan pouted. Actually pouted, like he was a little kid. Why do you have to spoil my fun? Because I don't get paid enough to put up with your nonsense, Takeda replied, and then smiled at Midoriya, who had absolutely no idea how to react to any of this. Don't worry, this is normal. I have to go back to the lobby, but don't be afraid to smack this idiot on the head if he does something stupid. I do it all the time. As soon as she left, Hawks straightened up and chuckled. She acts like I don't know what I'm doing, but she means well, and I love having a sidekick who isn't afraid to call me out on something. Hawks was nothing like he expected so far. He looked the same, only a few inches taller than Midoriya, with messy blonde hair and stubble on his chin. He wore a costume that looked like a stylized aviator's outfit, with a beige-yellow jacket and pants, a black shirt, a yellow-tinted visor of his eyes, and yellow headphones that fit securely over his ears. What really stood out, and what gave the winged hero his moniker, were his enormous wings. Furled against his back, they looked small, but the red wings were more than strong enough to carry him effortlessly through the air. Hawks gave an easy smile and held out his hand. "Hey, there, nice to meet you." Midoriya tentatively shook his hand. "And nice to meet you too. Sorry, kinda figured you needed an easier greeting after that little snafu." Hawks gestured to one of the beanbag chairs. "Take a seat, okay? Just give me a sec. I actually was in the middle of something before I decided to mess with you." While Midoriya sat down and tried to process everything he had just seen, Hawks turned to his computer. Rather than actually walk over to it, he just raised an eyebrow. Two of his feathers detached from his wings and shot over to the keyboard, and then started pressing keys. A moment later, an email was sent. "I probably don't need to do that," Hawks admitted as the feathers rejoined the others on his back. "But I'm so used to practicing my control with that part of my quirk that I never broke the habit." "It's an amazing quirk, though," Midoriya said with genuine interest. Impressed, but not surprised. Hawks smirked. "I'm guessing you did your research before coming here." Midoriya blushed. Actually, I learned about you before even starting at UA. Heroes and quirks are a hobby of mine." Hawks grinned. "Okay, how much do you know?" "Each feather is capable of holding a surprising amount of weight, though the larger feathers can hold a lot more. And they're all pretty durable," Midoriya immediately said, like he was reading the information in front of him. "They die pretty quickly if you don't reattach them to your wings, and once they do, you can't control them. They regenerate over time, and you can go from no feathers at all to completely full in 4 days." Hawks had looked amused before, but now he was staring. "I can't decide whether I should be impressed or a little freaked out." "How do you know about the 4 days?" "That's not something I've advertised." "I did the math," Midoriya admitted. "Okay, I'll go with impressed." Hawks smiled again. "So, Midoriya, you ready for the big leagues?" Midoriya grinned back. "Yes, sir." Ashido couldn't keep the grin off her face if she wanted to. Sky Dancer was unlikely to ever get much higher in the rankings, but she was awesome. Her agency was also a dance studio, one that looked like it came right out of the 1980s, complete with neon colors and loud music. Sky Dancer herself looked like she had taken the same look and modernized it. Her outfit was a mix of a purple bodysuit with green sleeves and carbon fiber armor on her forearms and calves. She also had a bright pink mask that rose up enough to look like a headband. She had pink hair and a wide smile. If not for the lack of horns, normal skin and normal eyes, she could have passed for Ashido's sister. "Hey there." Sky Dancer finished an impressive routine of flips and kicks, then caught a water bottle tossed to her by an employee without looking, a skill Ashido really wanted to learn. "You're Ashido Mina, right? Welcome to my agency." "Hi." Ashido bowed, but couldn't stop trembling with excitement. "It's great to be here." "I'll bet." "Hey, why don't you use one of our changing rooms and get into costume? I like to run my interns through their paces a bit on their first day. Watching your routine on TV is great and all, but a performance looks so much better when you see it with your own eyes." Ashido was starting to like this woman. She quickly changed, and when she stepped back into the studio, Sky Dancer laughed. "Okay, I had no idea we had similar costume colors. This has to be, like, fate or something." She turned to another employee and snapped her fingers twice. It was obviously a signal of some kind, because a high-energy beat started to play from the speakers. "Show me what you've got, kid. Let's throw down." Ashido tilted her head. "What, are we gonna fight now?" "Kind of." Sky Dancer skipped into the air, but didn't come back down. Her quirk, as described to Ashido by Midoriya, was called Sky Step. Simply put, it let Sky Dancer stay airborne as long as she kept up some momentum. "We're not gonna really fight. I just want to get a handle on your moves. No acid, though. I just got the floors waxed. All I want you to do is try to tag me, and try not to get tagged by me. You picking up what I'm putting down?" Ashido's face started to hurt from all the smiling, but she quickly went into a series of stretches. "Oh, I'm ready." "Always keep an eye on your surroundings," Airjet instructed as he flew alongside his student. "Every swing that takes you below a traffic light is a risk of startling a driver. That means a potential accident. Maybe the driver gets hurt, maybe a pedestrian, or maybe even you." "Yes, sir." Cellophane swung from a light pole, making sure to stay high enough to not accidentally kick someone on the street, but low enough to get enough swing for his next leap. After a brief introduction, Cellophane's mentor immediately brought him out on patrol. He took his schedule very seriously, but knew how to incorporate lessons for the intern. Airjet was stern, but not inflexible, and he was quick to see his intern's strengths and weaknesses. Today, he was focusing on training Cellophane's situational awareness. It was far more intensive than the student had expected. However, it involved fieldwork, and that was fun. And if he happened to learn a thing or two, then that was even better. I hope the others are having as great a time, he thought. So, I have a question for you, Hawk said as Midoriya, now in his costume, stepped into the sparring room. What are the two biggest weaknesses shared by all heroes that brought Midoriya up short? I don't know. I'm sorry, Hawks-sensei. Just call me Hawks. I'm too young to be called sensei by anyone. Hawks idly stretched out his wings. Anyway, the two weaknesses are this: reaction instead of action, and specialization. For the first part, it's simple. Everything we do as heroes is in reaction to something else. We can't stop a natural disaster before it starts, and we can't stop villains from trying to commit crimes. We almost always get somewhere after the trouble has started. If we're really lucky, we'll get there as it starts. Those precious minutes or seconds before and after a hero arrives could mean the difference between life and death. Heroes with high speeds, like me, can usually cut that time down by getting somewhere fast enough, but not always. For the second part, it's a little more complicated. See, a lot of heroes' quirks make them really good for certain situations, but lousy for others. Take Endeavor, for example. That guy is insanely strong, but you'll never see him working during a rainy day. Hawks chuckled. I'm not a fan of rain. Either it weighs down my feathers, slows my speed, and you do not want to know what wet bird smells like. Anyway, almost every hero has their niche. Even All Might, amazing as he is, won't be called in for a stealth mission. That makes sense, Midoriya said as he jotted all that down in his notebook. Hawks spoke quickly, but Midoriya was able to keep up. Thanks, I spent all morning making sure it wasn't complicated. Hawks paused. Wait, have you been taking notes this whole time? Midoriya looked up from his notebook. Why yes. Sorry, it's a habit. Hawks chuckled. You're going to be fun to work with. Moving on, you have the speed to minimize the first point, and the versatility to make my second point a non-issue. I only saw a few of your transformations during the sports festival, but your principal was kind enough to send me a file on each one that you've discovered. A feather detached and hovered over the Ultimatrix. That watch is sorting through your quirk, right? To give you new forms. Yes, Midoriya said. I'm not sure what I'll get, but when I transform, I do get an instinctive sense of how to use its abilities. Hawks shook his head ruefully. That is so cool. Alright, I want you to turn into something, and we'll have a quick spar. Midoriya blinked. Really? Yeah, just don't set the room on fire or use that earthquake one, okay? Hawk's tone was joking, but Midoriya took him seriously. Okay, comparing what he knew of Hawk's quirk with his aliens, Midoriya made his choice. He was about to press the dial, but a feather flew up and slapped his hand away. Oh, you took too long, Hawk said, and the feather in front of Midoriya wagged like a disapproving finger. You spend that much time in the field just thinking of what you're going to do, and the bad guy gets away, or a bystander bleeds out. You need to have each move honed to a razor's edge, to think and act at the same time. Midoriya nodded. That was something he still had trouble with. I've been working on that. Well, keep at it. I can tell you're a bright kid. But you've got to bridge the gap between theory and application. Hawk's feather started to orbit around Midoriya's head. Try again. This time, I'll give you 3 seconds. Midoriya didn't wait for Hawks to give him the go-ahead. He figured the man wouldn't give him one anyway. He slammed his hand on the dial and vanished in a flash of green light. Brainstorm. Hawks raised an eyebrow. I read about this one. Grant super intelligence and electricity, right? The man-sized orange crab brushed off an imaginary speck of dirt with one thin pincer, then regarded the hero with big eyes, set in an even bigger head. Indeed, Brainstorm said in a cultured voice, my intellect is almost certainly greater than that of any creature on Earth. You saying you're smarter because your head is bigger? No, I am smarter because my brain is bigger. A dozen more feathers joined the first. Then show me what you've got. Oh my gosh, no way. Hato practically tackled Yaoyorozu off her feet when the younger girl entered the Ryukyu agency. I didn't know one of Izukun's friends was interning here. That's so cool. Yaoyorozu tentatively returned the hug. And I didn't know one of the big three would be here. Also, she called Izuku Izukun. When did that happen? Alright, Nejire, calm down, a woman's voice called out. I'd like to meet my new intern while she can still breathe. Yaoyorozu had seen pictures and videos of the Dragoon hero before, but it was another thing entirely to be in her presence. She was beautiful, with a dark red dress accented by yellow slashes, white sleeves that exposed her shoulders and hands, and elegant, but still sturdy boots. Her short blonde hair was kept out of her face by a green headband, while most of the right side of her face was covered by a set of 4 metallic claws. On the back of her head was an ornament made to look like dragon wings. "Welcome to my agency, Yaoyorozu-san," Ryukyu said with a smile and a bow. "Nejire can show you where you'll be staying. Please, make yourself at home." "Thank you for giving me such an opportunity," Yaoyorozu said, and bowed back. "It is such an honor." Ryukyu actually looked a little embarrassed. "You're pouring it on a little thick. Please, I didn't offer an internship to be fawned over. I get that enough from my fans." Hado giggled. "Better them than the press." She winked at Yaoyorozu. "The nasty ones don't get close anymore after Ryukyu threatened to eat one of them. That was 2 years ago, and he was so obsessed with his smear campaign that he threatened to stab someone unless he got an interview." If anything, Ryukyu looked even more embarrassed. "Can we please get back on track?" Yaoyorozu held up a hand. May I ask a question?" "Sure thing," Ryukyu said with no small amount of relief. "Why did you offer me an internship? I know that I did fairly well in the sports festival, but..." "That's part of it," Ryukyu admitted, and there was a look of pain in her uncovered eye that sobered even Hado. "There's another, though. I watched your matches in the final event, and I saw some of the reactions to your attire. I know that it has to do with your quirk, but female heroes are often under intense scrutiny, both by fans and the press. I've seen more than a few attractive female heroes quit the business or develop unhealthy mindsets because of unsavory comments. When I first started out, I nearly quit because of those people, but I pushed through the pain their words caused. Now, I want to help young women like you become as good as possible, and help you develop a thicker skin in the process." Yaoyorozu was honestly a little shocked by Ryukyu's frank response. However, she wasn't as surprised as the older woman might have thought. Ever since she hit puberty, she'd been the target of leering men and jealous women. Most of it was just looks, but there was always the occasional comment, and in the beginning, it had made her want to curl up in a ball and disappear. Thankfully, her parents had caught on to her distress early. The self-defense lessons had helped to teach her how to keep herself physically safe, but it had also built up her self-confidence. Now, if someone gave her a dirty look or said something perverted, she could ignore it easily, because she knew she could probably break the offender's arms in 6 different ways. And that was before using her quirk. With that, the possibilities were almost limitless. Instead of saying any of that, however, she just bowed. "Thank you for the explanation. I look forward to learning everything I can from you." Ryukyu shared a surprised glance with Hado, and then smiled. "Most girls would be more nervous after all that. In fact, Nejire is the only other intern I've had who didn't turn to the door after I give that speech. I think you'll fit right in here." Yaoyorozu smiled back. Hawks was quietly impressed. While his new intern's initial start to their spar had been rocky, his performance now was fantastic. It seemed that Midoriya had taken his lecture to heart. At first, he had shot away Hawk's attacking feathers with bolts of electricity by opening up the shell on his head and exposing his brain, which was a little unsettling. Hawks upped his speed and added another dozen feathers. In response, Midoriya, or did he prefer to go by his form's name now, surrounded himself in a bubble of electricity. "Going defensive won't help you in this fight," Hawks taunted, only to realize that Brainstorm wasn't just hiding behind a shield. He had been slowly extending a field of electricity along the floor, inching towards Hawk's feet. "Nice try, kid." Hawks fully extended his wings and rose up to the ceiling. He crossed his arms and looked down at his intern. "Okay, I've avoided your trap, and now I have all the time in the world to attack you," he said. "What's your next play?" "If you must know, I have already calculated 59 ways of defeating you," Brainstorm replied. "Granted, 14 of them would result in massive property damage, and 2 of them are certainly lethal." "Alright, so which one will you use?" Hawks had a few ideas. Brainstorm wasn't the first person who could manipulate electricity that he'd fought, though he was probably the smartest. "None of them," Brainstorm said smugly. "You've fallen for my distraction." No, Hawks hadn't. He'd seen the electricity crawling up the walls and along the ceiling, effectively boxing him in. However, Brainstorm had been so focused on setting up his trap that he'd let his defenses slip. His smirk never leaving his face, Hawks detached more feathers and spun them in a tight cone, almost like a drill, and then hurled it at Brainstorm. The suddenness of the attack punched through his shield and slammed him into the far wall. "Let's call it here, kid," Hawks said as the electricity faded. "This was just a warm-up. I don't want you straining yourself and being too tired for tomorrow night." Midoriya turned back to normal and rubbed his sore chest as he stood up. "What are we doing tomorrow night?" "The same thing we do every night. Pinky tried to take over the world." Hawks laughed, but then he sighed when all Midoriya did was give him a blank stare. Okay, so you didn't get that reference. Damn. Sorry. Nah, it's fine. Hawks waved him off. Anyway, what we're actually doing is heading out to Hasu. Never let it be said that Midoriya couldn't put the pieces together. You mean? Oh, yeah. Hawk's smile turned grim. The word's out, and heroes from all over are coming in to bring the hammer down. The hero killer isn't getting away this time. That night, Midoriya was having trouble sleeping. Not only was he thinking about actively searching for or at least helping Hawks search for the hero killer, his mentor's lecture on a hero's weaknesses was still fresh in his mind. Finally, he gave up on just staring at the ceiling and brought out his phone. All Might, is anyone else awake? Comet, I am. Hi, Deku-kun, what's up? All Might, I can't sleep. Hawks gave me a lot to think about. Crayon, zzzzz. Crayon, JK, I'm awake. Interred, but I had so much fun with Sky Dancer. Comet, looks like it's just us three. Everyone else must be asleep. Crayon, Midori gets us all to himself, lol he's so lucky. Comet, stop being mean, Mina. Hey, did you guys finish the homework we have to do over the inertia? Comet, sorry, trying to figure out these math problems at the same time. Brain got fried for a sec. All Might, Kaminari, give a Choco back her phone. Crayon, lol, he's making jokes. All Might, Hawks keeps trying to be funny. Keyword being trying. I thought I'd do better. Comet, so what's it like at his agency? All Might, it's kind of weird. It's like he's trying too hard to be normal. Maybe he doesn't like all the attention. All Might, or maybe he's just awkward around students, and I'm reading into it too much. All Might, how about you, Choco? Comet, Gunhead is kind of wacky, but in a good way. He's super serious about training, but when we're talking about anything casual, he acts kind of cute. Crayon, look out, Midori, Gunhead is stelling her girl. All Might, angry wild mutt noises. Comet, good boy. Who's a good Deku-kun? Is it you? Yes, you are. Crayon, okay, I know you are just messing around, but that's adorable and I'm gonna puke rainbows. Crayon, night everyone. Comet, yeah, I think I'm ready for sleep. T-Tile, everyone. All Might, good night. His nerves calmed by the easy banter, Midoriya closed his eyes and fell asleep. A few minutes later, his eyes snapped open and he sat up. Did I just flirt with Ochako? Ben groaned. Oh my god. Despite her words, Uraraka took much longer to fall asleep. Her face burned and her heart was pounding. She tried to tell herself that Midoriya had just been joking around, that he was comfortable enough with her to pretend to be jealous. She wanted to hope that that was the case, because the alternative was too terrifying to think about. But what if he does like me? She wondered, and gripped her sheets tightly. After the internships, I'll ask him then. Maybe Gunhead can give me some pointers on being brave. Come on, Deku, keep up. Hawks shouted over the roaring wind. I can reach Hasu in 5 minutes on a slow day. Jetray made a face at him. I'm right next to you, how am I not keeping up? After a light breakfast, they jumped off the roof of the agency and flew straight for Hasu. Thankfully, they didn't have far to go, but there was still time for a few questions. How come you didn't go after Stain before? Jetray asked. Hasu is right next door. Politics. Hawks said the word with so much venom that Jetray was surprised the man didn't spit afterwards. The government didn't want to give Stain too much public attention, so they kept the big names from going after him. Over 20 heroes died. Hawks scowled. And now you know why I hate politics. Seriously, they could have flooded Hasu with hundreds of heroes after his first attack, but they didn't. We've been lobbying for a more active approach after his first kill, but the government didn't want to cause a panic. But all this waiting around just got more people killed. And there are some people on the internet who are saying that Stain is doing the right thing. Exactly, the problem was basically ignored until it was too late. Now, the higher-ups decided that the best way to regain public trust is to send in as many heroes as they can and crush the hero killer. Hawks shook his head as they swooped into land. Still, maybe we can douse the fire before the whole forest burns down. Hawks put a smile on his face as dozens of people crowded around, asking for autographs or to ask questions. One woman in the back of the crowd asked if she could have Hawks' babies. To Deku's embarrassment, more than a few people started asking him questions like if Hawks was taking him on as an early sidekick, or how it felt to win the sports festival. Still, he did his best to stay composed. This was his first outing as Deku, a future hero, and he had to make it count. Thankfully, Hawks held up one hand to quiet the crowd, and such was the respect they had for him that they obeyed. Hey, you all know how much I love to talk, he said, but my intern and I are actually on patrol right now. Don't worry, we're here to make sure everyone stays safe. Are you going after the hero killer? One person asked. Hawks smirked. Only if that guy over there doesn't get to him first. The crowd, and Deku, turned to see Endeavor half a block away. He was followed by a small team of sidekicks and his son, who went wide-eyed when he caught sight of his classmate. Ironically, the crowd's enthusiasm cooled. Endeavor wasn't exactly known for being friendly, even with fans, so the civilians started to go on their way. Hawks, Endeavor grunted as he walked up to the shorter man. I see you've been called in as well. Hawks shrugged. Yeah, what can you do? Say, why don't we split patrols and make it easier on ourselves? I can take the eastern half, if you like. Endeavor crossed his arms. Very well, but I expect you to pull your weight. No problem at all. Hawks was almost submissive in how he addressed Endeavor, but in a respectful way. It reminded Deku of how some of his classmates reacted to seeing All Might at that point. Endeavor turned his gaze to Deku. You're the boy who convinced Shoto to finally use his flames. You're more impressive than I first thought. Before Deku could reply, Endeavor walked off to speak with a nearby police officer. That's about as polite as he gets, Triumph said quietly as he stepped next to his friend. Don't take it personally. Deku smiled. Thanks. How have you been since the internship started? Oh, did you run into Virtus today? And you have a new costume. Aside from his white boots, Triumph had completely changed his look. He had blue pants and a blue jacket with short sleeves. He also wore a metal-plated combat vest and a series of capsules hanging from his belt that Midoriya recognized as those that contained medical supplies. He had the same tools on his own belt. I haven't seen him, but Hasu is a big place, and I didn't get much training done yesterday. Triumph just shrugged and didn't respond to the comment about his costume. I'll be doing that a lot at home anyway. Endeavor has been showing me field protocol stuff. It's actually kind of interesting. You're not wrong, Hawk said. Keep an eye on how a pro hero acts around different people. When it's civilians and there's nothing happening, just try to show self-confidence. When you're talking to the police or other first responders, remember to stay professional and respectful. They put their lives on the line just as much as we do, but they don't get nearly as much credit. Both boys nodded. It was good advice, and it would help keep them humble. Now then, Hawks clapped his hands together. Let's go find a serial killer. How are you dealing with your first patrol, Virtus? Manuel paused to adjust his finned helmet. I know it's a little boring right now, and you were probably expecting some excitement. Virtus shook his head. No, this is fine. If anything, it has given me time to think. Manuel might have been called the normal hero, but that just made him more approachable. Even his costume was normal, consisting of a blue shirt, yellow gloves, dark pants, and white boots. The only thing that stood out was his helmet, with its distinctive fin and blue visor. He was humble and polite, but also unafraid to lighten the mood. It reminded Virtus of Tensei in a way. What are you thinking about? Manuel's easy smile morphed into a thoughtful frown. Is it the hero killer? I know Ingenium is your brother, so I assume the reason you signed on with my agency is because you thought you might run into the man who attacked him. He grimaced. Sorry, I didn't mean any offense. No, it is fine. That was my initial reason for picking you, and I apologize for that. Virtus would have bowed, but he had more to say. That is, until a few days ago. Some of my friends spoke to me about it, and convinced me that seeking revenge would only result in more people getting hurt. Besides, even if I did find the hero killer, he was able to defeat my brother and an entire team of sidekicks. I am not even halfway done with my first year of high school. Manuel chuckled. Your friends gave you some good advice. Since you don't have a license, going after the hero killer would just get you labeled as a vigilante, and you'd have to be arrested. That crossed my mind as well. Virtus shrugged. I still wish to hurt Stain for all he did to my brother, but I will settle for cheering when he is finally brought to justice. He paused. Not all of that was from my friends. As I said, I have had time to think on this patrol. That's good to hear. Manuel patted him on the shoulder. Patrols like this are good for clearing your head. Whoa, look sharp. Virtus followed his gaze and saw an elderly couple slowly crossing a busy street. Should we intervene? Let's just stay nearby and keep an eye on them, Manuel said. See, being a hero isn't always about fighting villains and helping in a disaster. Most days, it's just about giving people a helping hand. I have to keep that in mind, Virtus thought. This cannot be about revenge. This is about doing what I can to help, while Tensei recovers. So, kid, Hawk said as he and Deku walked down the streets of Hasu, I've got a question for you. Think of it like a quiz. Sure. Deku didn't know what to expect from Hawks. The hero was strolling casually, his hands behind his head. What's the difference between a criminal and a villain? I'll give you a hint. All villains are criminals, but not all criminals are villains. That was something Deku hadn't heard of before. I don't know. Sorry. It's all right. It's why you're here. Hawks grinned at him reassuringly. See, a criminal is anyone who breaks the law, obviously. A villain is defined as anyone who uses their quirk to commit a crime. Let me give you an example. Say there's a guy with a quirk that lets him cause extreme pain to anyone he touches, and he's going around robbing stores. Obviously, he's very dangerous, but he never uses his quirk. When he gets caught, they'll check if he ever used his quirk during his crimes. Since he didn't, his sentence usually isn't as harsh. Hawks paused for a moment, and his smile became a bit forced. Villains, especially those with dangerous quirks, have to be carefully evaluated. Those who have no chance of reform are sent to Tartarus. I'm sure you know about that place. Deku swallowed nervously. Why yes, it's the most secure prison in Japan. Most countries have a facility like it, but Tartarus is the only one to never have a prisoner even escape their cell, let alone break out of the entire prison. A thought came to him. You mentioned something about villains who can't be reformed. What about those who can? Hawk's smile became genuine again. There's something called the anti-hero program. Villains who genuinely want to turn their lives around and haven't committed a serious offense can make an appeal to join the program. They're basically put on probation under a hero. Well, it's kind of like a parole officer. The ex-villain works under that hero like a sidekick. Only with a reduced pay, they're called anti-heroes. After a while, depending on how well the anti-hero does, they can either rejoin society as regular citizens earlier than if they'd just stayed in prison, or they can become full-time sidekicks and eventually pro-heroes. I've never heard of that, Deku said, a little annoyed that such a fascinating concept had escaped him. It's not something that's widely known, Hawks told him. A lot of heroes with criminal backgrounds would lose a lot of clients if the public found out they used to be villains. Also, the government doesn't like heroes to be anything less than squeaky clean, so they bury that info pretty deep. He leaned over and gave Deku a conspiratorial wink. Can you keep a secret? I really hope he isn't about to tell us that he used to be a villain, Ben, who had been listening as attentively as Deku, commented. You've already met someone in the program, though she passed muster as a full-fledged psychic last month. It took Deku about 2 seconds to realize who Hawks was talking about. He opened his mouth to shout, but 3 feathers shot out and covered his face until he calmed down. Take-the-sen used to be a villain, he whispered. I thought she went to Ketsubutsu. She was never in the hero course, Hawks said, and she never hurt anyone. She's good at what she does, and she's always been honest with me. Anti-hero or not, she's been one of my best sidekicks. Another year or 2, and I'll recommend her as a full-time hero. Deku wasn't sure what to think about that. The idea of villains turning over a new leaf was appealing, but after the USJ attack, he wasn't about to go holding out the hand of forgiveness to every criminal he met. Still, Take-the-san was really nice. Anyway, now that we've got the lessons of the day finished, why don't we find some lunch? Hawks jerked his thumb to point at a ramen stand across the street. I'm down for something cheap. Deku nodded. Food sounded good, especially if it helped him process everything he had learned. Stain stepped out of the shadows and into the cool evening air. He could admit that Hasu was beautiful at night, even with the false heroes dragging their filth everywhere. But that was why he was here, to force them all to clean up after themselves, and if they wouldn't do it, he would. Something moved in the corner of his eye, and he whirled around, katana drawn. If you want to live, leave this place. The humanoid shape of Living Shadow stepped out. Its yellow eyes stared at him unblinkingly. My apologies, hero killer, I mean no offense, nor do I wish to do battle with you. My name is Kurogiri, and my employer would like a word with you. Stain sneered. And why should I listen to anything you or your employer have to say? Kurogiri merely bowed his head. You are, of course, welcome to decline this invitation. However, there is someone I very much would like you to meet. He is young and angry at the world, but particularly with heroes. Aside from wanting them dead, he has no real goal. I have a vested interest in seeing him grow beyond his childish impulses. Perhaps you could help him with that. Stain slowly lowered his sword. Consider me intrigued, Kurogiri. I'll go with you, but if I think for even a moment that I am being led into a trap, you will be the first to die. Make this quick, I still have work to do here. Very well. Kurogiri waved a gaseous hand, and a portal appeared. Right this way. Stain cautiously followed Kurogiri into the portal. When he emerged on the other side, he found himself in a somewhat shabby bar. It was dimly lit and a little cramped. The only person there, other than Kurogiri, who was putting on clothes and slipping behind the usual bartender's spot, was a young man in black clothes and a severed hand over his face. So, you're the famous hero killer. The young man leaned back in his seat in front of Kurogiri. I'm Shigaraki Tamura. I'd shake your hand, but you'd lose it. From the tone of his voice, Stain assumed it had something to do with the man's quirk. I've heard of you, and your so-called League of Villains. You fled with your tail between your legs after you attacked UA. Aside from a slight clenching of one hand, there was no reaction from Shigaraki. I'll admit, that could have gone better. Our plan was basic, and didn't take certain factors into account. I was impatient and reckless. My moves will be more measured from now on. Stain raised an eyebrow behind his mask. The rumors he'd heard about Shigaraki implied he was a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. But the young man before him had learned from his mistakes. That was enough to lower Stain's scorn of the man, but heightened his tension. There were few things more dangerous than a criminal who evolved so quickly. "What is it you want from me?" he asked. Shigaraki calmly waved him over to a seat. Stain cautiously took one, but not so close that Shigaraki could easily grab him. "Anyone not living under a rock knows about what you've done," Shigaraki said. "You've killed plenty of heroes, and I like that. But I noticed something that I really wanted to ask you about. Why not kill them all?" Stain met Shigaraki's gaze evenly. "Excuse me, a lot of your victims were badly hurt, or even permanently crippled, but you could have just killed them," Shigaraki explained. "So, why not do exactly that? Wipe the slate clean." "Ah, so that's what it is." Stain's crusade had done little to espouse his views. He wanted his actions to create more action, not a debate. "Some heroes are beyond redemption," he said, and reached for the glass of water Kurogiri poured for him. It did nothing to wash out the taste of blood, but it had also been a long time since he'd had a real conversation with anyone. "Those deserve the death I bring. Others, those whose sins are lesser, I leave as warnings for the rest." "But what is your warning?" Shigaraki asked, and leaned forward a little. "Are you warning them that they're next?" Stain shook his head. "No, I warn them that that is their fate if they do not change their ways. Heroes today don't deserve the title. All they do is chase petty ambition and personal greed. A true hero places their duty to others before anything else. Saving lives and ending crime should be their only goal, not seek rewards and praise. You seek to bring about an age where heroes are truly heroic," Kurogiri interjected. "Exactly." Stain nodded in approval. "You understand what I want." Shigaraki didn't respond at first. He just tapped the edge of the bar with one finger. "Okay, but there are a few problems that I can see." Stain bristled at first, but Shigaraki wasn't taunting him. If anything, he sounded genuinely interested. "And what are they?" "First, you're only one man," Shigaraki said. "Eventually, you'll make a mistake or get cornered by a group of heroes you can't take alone. Trying to solo world events only works if you hack the system or are an anime protagonist. The second problem I see is that you're really not selling your point to everyone. People on the internet have been arguing for months about your message, or even if you have one. Just because you know what your message is doesn't mean it'll actually spread." "My resolve is my own, and it has been working," Stain replied. He was a little irritated, but also delighted that someone was willing to discuss this with him. "After I finish my work in a city, heroes step up and take their duties seriously. And what if you get caught?" Shigaraki pressed. "How many villains are remembered after they're gone? Give it 5 years, and you'll be a footnote on some forum. Maybe you'll even get a poster and some memes if you're lucky." "Only if I get caught," Stain countered. "I have yet to meet a hero I cannot defeat." "That's about to change." Shigaraki reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He brought up a recent news article and showed it to Stain. 20 hero agencies have been called to Hasu after you attacked Ingenium, including Hawks and Endeavor. You're a high-level player, hero killer, but you're still trying to solo raid bosses." Stain was quiet for a moment. "I'm not so proud that I think I could defeat either of those two, not without careful planning." He glared at Shigaraki. "Is this why you brought me here? To try to convince me that I cannot continue my work without joining your little group?" Now it was Shigaraki's turn to be quiet. "That was what I wanted. Like I said, you're a high-level player, Stain, and having you in our party would bolster our prestige and help us in future encounters. But now, I think we have to part ways. You've helped me to realize that our philosophies are just too different for us to be compatible." "And how do we differ?" "Well, we do share one thing in common. We both think that this hero-focused society has failed and needs to change. The difference how we want to go about doing that. You want heroes to be these incorruptible champions of justice, so you'll kill or remove anyone who doesn't fit your mold. You're cutting off a diseased limb in order to save the body. Me, on the other hand, I think this society is too rotten to be healed and needs to be put to rest. Sometimes, trying to save a life just prolongs the misery." Shigaraki grinned widely enough to be seen around the hand on his face. "And if that means killing every hero, and anyone else who gets in my way, so be it." The hero killer's only reaction was to narrow his eyes, so, one of the few people to understand him still clung to a foolish idea. "Then it seems we oppose each other," Stain said, and got up. "Are we enemies?" "Not today." Shigaraki relaxed in his chair. Right now, you have your mission, and I won't get in the way of it. Stain recognized the truce for what it was. Then send me back to Hasu, my work is not yet done. As soon as the hero killer stepped through the portal Kurogiri made for him, Shigaraki chuckled. I expected you to be more confrontational, Kurogiri commented. He refused your offer to join us. Oh, I'm a little disappointed, but I'm still glad he visited. Shigaraki idly scratched his neck. That whole put society out of its misery thing. I had that idea floating around in my head, but it wasn't until Stain explained himself that it crystallized. I really should have thanked him while he was here, because now I know what I want. That is good news, my boy, the voice from the television in the corner said. And now that you have your resolve, what will you do about it? I wasn't lying about the hero killer being an enemy someday. He needs to be removed from the board. Shigaraki made a note on his phone. But we can still use him, guys like that always have followers, and if it seems like he was with us, we can draw them to us. We will have to ensure that he gets caught, or killed, without appearing to have a hand in it, Kurogiri said. I have an idea about that. Shigaraki turned to the television. Sensei, how many nomas are ready? 6, though none are as powerful as the one you brought to the USJ. Why? I want them. Kurogiri, use your quirk to keep an eye on the hero killer. We'll unleash the nomas in areas near him. Draw in the heroes, and let them do the work for us. If we're lucky, either Stain or the nomas will kill a few of them before the night is over. Shigaraki nodded to himself. Just make sure the nomas are close enough to Stain that people will start to connect the dots. How devious of you. The voice was full of pride and amusement. I approve of this plan, but I will only give you 4 nomas. That's fine, we can still use them to box him in. Shigaraki chuckled. You're the hero of your own story, Stain, and the hero always has a brilliant last stand. Don't disappoint me. I probably should have mentioned that we'd be out late, Hawks said as he and Deku walked down yet another street. Fun fact, heroes do daytime patrols mostly to keep up appearances or respond to emergencies, but actual crimes are usually committed at night. Villains think they can get away in the dark. That makes sense, Deku said, and stifled a yawn. Won't most heroes be tired after patrolling all day, though? You notice that nothing actually happened, right? Hawks idly scratched his chin. Lots of heroes see daytime patrols as light duty, so most of us are pretty rested by the time it gets dark. Also, you get used to being active for so long pretty fast, so don't worry about it so much. He paused and glanced at his intern. Something else on your mind, kid? Deku shrugged uncomfortably. I don't know, I kind of expected something to happen by now, but at the same time, I didn't, because there are so many heroes out. It was true, they couldn't go more than a block without seeing another hero on patrol. What embarrassed Deku was that many of them waved at him as often as they waved at Hawks. Apparently, he had turned even more heads than his internship offers had suggested. However, he had noticed that the heroes had become more and more serious as it got darker, and now he knew why. Kid, you've gotta learn to relax, Hawks said. Believe it or not, days without anything happening are the best kind of days. It means that no one, hero or civilian, is in danger. If anything, these kinds of days are what I want most as a hero. Really? Yeah. Hawks looked up at the sliver of sunlight in the distance and smiled wistfully. What I want more than anything else is a world where heroes have more free time than we know what to do with. It may sound weird, but I want a world so peaceful that we don't need heroes. Deku hadn't thought of it like that. The idea of a world that didn't need to be saved all the time sounded idyllic, and almost certainly impossible. At the same time, it was something worth striving for, and Deku found his respect for Hawks grow just a little more for such a noble goal. Still, he was getting pretty bored at that point, but he wasn't nearly as annoyed with that anymore. Though a part of him wanted something to happen, he was secretly glad that it had been a quiet day. After the USJ attack, he wasn't in a hurry to pick a fight with someone actively trying to kill him. Deku froze as he thought that. Please, universe, don't get any ideas. Stain didn't even try to hide his sneer as he watched the false heroes mill around below him. So many targets, but so much more risk. He had far too much work to do to get caught here. As if by providence, motion nearby caught his attention, and he smiled. Another fake had stopped in an alleyway, almost right below him. Perhaps this won't be as difficult as I thought. Stain shifted his balance and drew his sword. Just as he let gravity assist him in his attack, explosions rocked the city. Perhaps I was wrong. Hawks was in the air before the first explosion finished announcing itself. Deku was shocked for several vital seconds as he tried to figure out what was going on. But seeing his mentor flying in the direction of the chaos got him moving, and he was flying behind him as Jetre soon enough. That wasn't a gas explosion. Hawks shouted to be heard over the noise. Looks more like a fire-based quirk. Why would a villain do something like this? Jetre called back. My best guess is that he wants attention. Hawks slowed to a stop and hovered in the air. Looks like he has it now. Standing in the ruins of a burning car was what could only be described as a monster. It stood almost twice as tall as a normal person, with bulging muscles barely contained by dark skin, and veins that glowed red. The top half of its head looked like a human skull, but with an exposed brain. Curving over its head was a scorpion-like tail, only the stinger was replaced with what looked like a glowing cannon. The exposed brain was what tipped off Jetray, and nearly sent him into a panic. It's another Namu. What's going on? Hawks glanced at him. Namu, huh? That monster from the USJ attack has family, I guess. Feathers began to detach and swirl around him. Deku, I'll handle this. I'd be a pretty bad mentor if I brought you into a major fight. But don't worry, I'm not telling you to go hide in a corner. Hawk's feathers flew out and snatched people out of harm's way when a blast of lava shot out of the Namu's tail. You have my permission to use your quirk. Fly around the city and escort civilians to safety, or assist other heroes if you can. Just try to stay out of anything too big, okay? There was no more time to discuss it, so Jetray nodded. Yes, sir. Good. Now, if you'll excuse me. 2 large flight feathers flew into Hawk's hands, and he rocketed towards the Namu, the feathers held like swords. I have work to do. Jetray wanted to stay behind, if only because he really wanted to watch Hawks fight a villain in person. But he had his orders. Other heroes will be here soon, Ben assured him. You don't have to be at the center of attention every time there's a crisis, right? Jetray flew up to gain a better view, and winced when he saw 3 more fires around the city. This isn't good. He banked and flew towards the space between Hawk's fight and the nearest fire, but then something, a feeling, began niggling at the back of his mind. He flew up higher until the city looked more like a map, and realized what it was. All 4 explosions had formed a rough square, and heroes were flooding the spaces between each dot. It feels like this was done deliberately, Jetray thought, to keep people out or someone in. On a hunch, he headed back down towards the center of the square, which happened to be a maze of alleyways, exactly the kind of terrain favored by the hero killer. Moving at incredible speed, Jetray searched the area, hoping that he was wrong. He wasn't. Less than 10 seconds after starting his search, he found a man with wild hair and covered in bladed weapons standing over a bleeding figure with a raised sword. Unlike with the explosions, he didn't hesitate. There was someone in danger, and he had to help them. It was that simple. Faster than the human eye could track, he plunged into the alley and fired his neuroshock beams from his eyes, directly into the hero killer's back. Get away from him. Stain rolled with the unexpected hit and came to a ready crouch. Standing, or rather, hovering between him and his latest target was what looked like a bat and a stingray mixed together with red paint. Don't worry, the creature said, tilting its head just enough to look at the false hero, but also keep Stain in his sight. I'm here to save you. Despite the stinging pain in his back, Stain grinned. Finally, someone with their priorities straight. To Stain's surprise, the creature slapped the hourglass dial on its chest and transformed into a more humanoid shape. Diamond Head. So that's who it is. Stain might have been dedicated to his mission, but he still heard things. Recently, gossip had been flowing about a boy who had a quirk that gave him multiple forms and multiple powers. He had won the sports festival, which meant he was either skilled or lucky. You've made a poor choice, child, Stain said, and readied his bloody sword. Your decision to prioritize another's safety is commendable, so I will not kill you, but I cannot allow you to stand in the way of my work. I'll have to hurt you a little. The student widened his stance, blocking the false hero behind him as much as possible. One of his arms shifted and transformed into a curved blade. I'm not going to let you hurt anyone, Stain. Stain's smile widened. This one had courage and appeared to have genuine integrity. Perhaps he had time to test this would-be hero before he completed his work for the night. Diamond had kept his blade arm ready as he placed his other on the ground. A mass of diamond spikes rose up around Native, the hero he'd just saved, and created a rough cone that would keep him safe for a while. Across from him, Stain grinned. And you're keeping the victim safe. Good. Most fakes don't even think about the injured around them. I wish I'd just grabbed Native and flew off, Diamond had thought. But I have no idea how bad his injuries are. I might make it worse if I try to move him. My best bet is to keep Stain here until help arrives. Speaking of which, yeah, but I don't really know how well I'll do against you all by myself, he said out loud. I see where you're going with this, Ben said, though only Midoriya could hear him. Sending location to all contacts in the city sent. Good luck, buddy. Something Midoriya had learned was that, while transformed, his phone merged with the Ultimatrix. Apparently, the real Ben had asked Azimuth to add that feature, turning the Ultimatrix into a way to communicate. Neither Midoriya nor Holo Ben had the time to send a full message. Instead, his location and the word help was sent to Hawks, Triumph, and Virtus, the only people whose contact information he had that were in Hasu. He just hoped that they would get here in time. I'll give you one chance, he said, trying to buy precious seconds. Surrender, and no one else has to get hurt. Offering compassion, reluctant to cause harm, Stain idly twirled his sword. You're ticking off every box that a true hero should aspire for. But can you back up your words? Stain was fast. As far as Diamond Head knew, the man had no speed-based quirk, but he was almost a blur as he charged. The sword was inside his reach before he had time to react. And if he hadn't been made of living diamond, the blade would have carved a deep gash in his chest. Instead, there was a shower of sparks, though the impact was sudden enough to send him staggering back. Diamond Head tried to hit him with his blade arm, but Stain leaned out of the way, and then ducked when a punch was thrown. You've got the fundamentals down, and you have power, Stain commented gleefully. But you lack refinement. Your technique isn't there yet, the heart of a hero, not the skill. All the more reason to let you live. Is he evaluating me? Diamond had fired a burst of crystals at Stain, who nimbly dodged out of the way. Maybe I can keep him here until help arrives. Triumph put a wall between the enemy and the civilians. Endeavor unleashed a wave of fire at the Namu rampaging down the street. Rather than respond, Triumph stomped down with his right foot, and a thick wall of ice erupted to protect the innocent people trying to get away. He was reminded of when he did something similar at the USJ, though Heat Blast's flames were much more powerful than his father's. While Endeavor battled the Namu, Triumph kept watch. As an intern, he wasn't supposed to fight something like Namu unless there was no other choice. Besides, Endeavor seemed to have things in hand. He was about to back up behind his ice wall when he felt his phone vibrate, as was protocol in the field. It was only supposed to do anything if there was a message from a hero or another student in the area. Still keeping one eye on the fight, Triumph looked at his phone. 2 seconds later, he felt a twinge of fear in his heart. Izuku, Endeavor, he shouted, even as he sent the coordinates from his phone to Endeavor's. His father drove the Namu, a muscly-bound brute with no eyes to speak of, into the ground with a devastating punch. What? I have an emergency call. I'm responding now. With the bare minimum said, he spun on his heel and ran down the street. I've sent the location to your phone. Send back up when you're done. Shoto, come back. No time. Triumph yelled. My friend is in trouble. What kind of trouble? Manuel shouted over the chaos. I'm not sure, Virtus admitted, but my friend would not have sent it if it was not serious. Manuel scowled, and then used his quirk to hose down a fire with the water from a hydrant. Okay, as soon as I'm done here, I'll follow you with as many heroes as I can grab. Just be careful and don't take unnecessary risks. Understood. Virtus ran off as quickly as his boosters would allow. He prayed that Izuku was alright. He had almost lost his brother. He didn't want to lose one of his best friends. This isn't working, Diamond Head thought with frustration as his punch missed once again. He can't hurt me, but I'm not fast enough to hit him. What do I have that's both fast and tough? Stain jumped back and threw a knife right into Diamond Head's eye. If it had hit almost any of his other aliens, the injury would have been crippling, if not lethal. Instead, the blade shattered on his face. It's in the name. He pointed to his face. Diamond Head. Just testing, Stain said, and it bothered Diamond Head to see just how happy the maniac was. It's good to see that a hero can back up true ideals with power. I still need to buy time. So, I have a question, Diamond Head said, even as he made sure to keep Native safe. You hate false heroes, right? Anyone who does this for the fame and fortune. Exactly. All I want is a world where heroes truly live up to the word. Anyone else must be purged, or else their corruption will spread. Then I have a scenario for you. Say someone wants to be a hero. For the most part, they honestly like helping people. But the reason they became a hero in the first place is because they want money to help their family. Does that mean they deserve death? When Stain didn't immediately answer, Diamond Head kept talking. Do shades of gray not exist in your world? No, they don't. Stain hefted his sword again. To be a hero is to be selfless, to sacrifice for the common good. Anything else, anything, is just a reason to not be a hero at all. What do I have that can fight without worrying about those blades? Wait, I've got it. Well, that's too bad. Diamond Head's hand moved to the dial. Because I know someone like that, and she's one of the best people I know. Stain started to charge again, but then took a step back and shielded his eyes from the green light. Diamond Head was gone, replaced by Buzzshock. The living battery giggled maniacally. You should have given up when you had the chance. And you shouldn't have given up a form that could protect you from my blades. Stain rushed forward. I have hopes for you, boy. But associating with a false hero will corrupt you. I will purge this world of them before it takes root in you. The sword came down on Buzzshock's head, and two horrified voices rang out in the night. Izuku. Triumph saw Virtus at the same time as the other boy saw him. They were almost at Deku's location, and there was no time for talk, only action. Triumph only hoped that they were in time to save. They turned the corner just as Stain brought his sword down on a strange creature. It had to be Deku. It couldn't be anyone else, no matter how much Todoroki wished otherwise in that moment, and split him in half. Izuku. There was no thought, only shock, grief, and overwhelming anger. Triumph's left side erupted with flames, and he sent an inferno straight at the hero killer. The murderer ducked, only to get Virtus' recipro-assisted boot in his face that sent him tumbling down the alley. Both boys were panting heavily, on the verge of tears or rage, neither knew. But then they saw something that caused their hearts to swell with hope. Though he had been cut in two, Deku's body still hadn't fallen. In fact, both halves started to tremble, and then regenerate. In seconds, two identical creatures hovered in the air and laughed. Surprise! The living batteries flew over to Stain and fired bolts of green lightning from their hands. Stain cried out in pain, and then fell to the ground. One Deku, or were they the same, flew back toward his friends. Guys, you're here. Izuku. Virtus almost reached out to grab him. You're alive. How? Oh, you saw that. For a moment, Deku looked guilty. Sorry, this one is called Buzzshock. He's got electrical powers, and he can be divided into copies of himself. Triumph looked back at Stain, who was trying to fight back. He managed to kill the other Buzzshock, only to be faced with two more. He killed them several times, but within seconds, nearly 20 of them buzzed around his head, cackling and shooting bolts of lightning. That's useful, Triumph said. Yeah, I couldn't think of anything else that was fast enough to hit him and not be hurt by a lucky swing. Buzzshock pointed to a cone of diamond. There's a hero under there, and he's hurt. If we let up on Stain, he's going to kill him. Understood. Now that the panic was over, Triumph was more than ready to get into the fight. If you can keep him pinned, I can weaken him enough for Virtus to land a finishing blow. Sounds good. A scream of frustration caused Buzzshock to giggle. I think Stain is having a bad night. What do you think, Virtus? There was no answer. Virtus. Tenya. Virtus was staring at Stain. Everything had gone red, and all he wanted was to put the hero killer in the ground. He took a single step forward, and then stopped when Buzzshock zapped his arm with a tiny bolt of electricity. Oh, whatever you're doing, stop it, Buzzshock snapped. We need to stop him, not kill him. If we're going to be heroes, we can't take justice into our own hands. You know this, Tenya. What would your brother say if he knew what you were about to try? And just like that, the spell was broken. Virtus' shoulders slumped, and he let out a deep breath. You're right. I can do this. Buzzshock and Triumph shared a look, and then the former nodded. We'll give you an opening, just be ready. Virtus nodded and took a runner's stance. Just tell me when. Enough. Stain was hurt by the lightning, but the pain only fueled his rage, and he burst through the mob of Buzzshocks and charged the students. This world will be purged. Triumph tried to disrupt his charge by creating a mound of spiked ice, but Stain vaulted over it and kicked Buzzshock out of the way when he tried to intercept him. The hero killer hurled a knife with enough force to bury it in Triumph's shoulder all the way up to the hilt. The boy barely had time to register that he'd been hit when the knife was ripped back out by an attached wire and landed back in Stain's hand. The murderer's tongue licked the blood off, and just like that, Triumph collapsed to the ground. Todoroki, are you all right? Virtus asked, while every Buzzshock blasted Stain with more electricity than was strictly necessary. I've never been stabbed before, but I'm pretty sure it's not supposed to be pleasant. So, no, Triumph said through gritted teeth. And I can't move. Looks like Deku was right about his quirk. Virtus grimaced. Things were far from ideal. If they were, none of them would have been fighting the hero killer in the first place, but they were far from dire. The swarm of Buzzshocks was keeping Stain from getting too far. They had learned their lesson, and none of them were letting up on the lightning. Virtus, one Buzzshock, possibly the original, said, "We're gonna try something. Don't worry about collateral damage to one of us. Just kick as hard as you can and aim for his leg." Virtus trusted Deku, and he nodded. "Do it." "Dogpile," one Buzzshock shouted, and over a dozen of them grabbed onto Stain. Individually, Buzzshock didn't weigh that much, but all of them together meant that Stain was too slow to react, especially with his nerves damaged by the electricity. "Now, this is for Tensei," Virtus shouted, and his boosters glowed. "Recipro extend." Virtus' outstretched foot sent two Buzzshocks flying, even as it smashed into Stain's right leg. There was a sickening crunch as something broke, but the impact jarred the other buzzshocks enough for Stain to shake them loose, and then drove the hilt of his sword into Vertus' head. The helmet kept him from getting too badly hurt, but the boy's bell was rung and he stumbled back. Stain brought his sword up to finish the job, only to be slammed back by a column of ice that rammed into his chest. Triumph, you can move, Vertus asked. No, came the answer, but I can still use my quirk. Good thing I've got so much practice with my ice. Now, someone take him down. Let's see you get up from this. 5 buzzshocks grabbed onto Stain's limbs, and their bodies crackled with electricity while 3 more hovered overhead. Battery blitz. Lightning coursed through Stain's body from the direct contact, while the trio above combined their blasts into one powerful bolt right into his chest. For a moment, everyone was tense as they waited for Stain to make his next move. Instead, he collapsed, his body twitching from the sustained shocks. Vertus looked down at the unconscious man. Is it over? Buzzshock nodded slowly. I think it is. This is starting to get annoying, Hawks muttered as he narrowly avoided the Namu's lava. This guy just won't stay down. Normally, Hawks could take down a villain in 2 or 3 minutes on a slow day, maybe 5 if his opponent was on the tough side, but this Namu seemed to have every advantage. His lava burned away his feathers, and he was tough enough to take anything Hawks dished out. Still, I can't give up. If this guy runs wild, he could kill a lot of people. Hawks, get out of the way. Acting on instinct, Hawks pulled up, just as a torrent of fire slammed into the Namu's head. Hawks grinned down at the ground. About time you got here, Endeavor, he called out. You getting slow in your old age. Shut it, you punk, Endeavor shouted. I've already beaten 2 of these things, and I was chasing another. Okay, sheesh. Hawk's eyes narrowed. If you can hold that tail steady, I'll disarm him, and you can finish the job. Rather than argue, Endeavor ducked under a spurt of lava, stunned the Namu with a devastating punch, and then grabbed the tail. In an instant, Hawks brought down his longer flight feathers and sliced the end of the tail clean off. Endeavor followed it up with a double-fisted blow that drove the Namu's head into the street hard enough to shatter the sidewalk. Good, that's done. Endeavor narrowed his eyes at Hawks. Get back in the air and find that other creature. It was flying south last time I saw it. If you can't find it, he pulled out his phone and typed something. Go to that location. At least 2 students are there and might be in trouble. Hawks looked at his own phone and realized that he'd missed a message during the fight. His expression never changed, but his pulse sped up when he saw that it was from his intern. I'm on it, he said without his usual smirk, and took to the air. Damn it, kid, I thought you wouldn't get into trouble. After briefly turning into Diamond Head to free Native, Deku and Vertus applied what first aid they could to the injured. Fortunately, Triumph was only affected by Stain's quirk for a few more seconds after the hero killer was defeated, though Native was confused. How come he got free so quickly? The man asked. I still can't move. I had a theory that the hero killer's quirk had a time limit based on blood type. Deku muttered as he wrapped bandages around the hero's shoulder. I have type O blood, Triumph offered. That might be the least affected. What about you, Native? Type B Native frowned, though at that point he finally started to move again. I guess it affects my blood type for a while. Sorry about all of this, kids. I'm supposed to be a pro hero, but I couldn't do anything. Honestly, I don't think anyone would do well against the hero killer in a one-on-one fight, Deku said. Triumph scoffed, but there was no heat behind it. I think you would have taken him down eventually with that buzzshock form of yours. Deku shook his head. Honestly, I hit him with enough volts to take down a normal person a dozen times over, but he kept fighting. He was a fanatic, and he refused to stop. I think he would have fought his way clear before I found the right amount of voltage. Vertus looked over at Stain, who had been disarmed after a thorough search, and then frozen up to his neck by Triumph. I agree, he just kept fighting until his body couldn't take it anymore. How are we going to get him out of here? Deku asked, which brought everyone else up short. I guess we just leave him in the ice, Triumph said. We can keep an eye on him until more heroes arrive to take him into custody. I'll stay and make sure the ice doesn't melt. Right? Deku handed Vertus the rest of his medical supplies and ran to the Allah's entrance. I'll flag down any heroes and show them where to go. Deku, wait, Vertus tried to go after him, only for the world to sway, and he fell to his hands and knees. What's wrong? Native asked, his tone serious and direct. Clearly, he knew what he was doing. I saw you take a hit to your head. I'm taking off your helmet. It was difficult to see in the dark, so Native turned to Triumph. Can I get a little light? Sure thing. Triumph generated enough fire to drive off the darkness. All right, let's see what we've got here. Native gently prodded the burst skin running down the side of Vertus' head, and then examined his eyes. Looks like you might have a slight concussion. Any nausea? No, just dizziness, and my head hurts, Vertus said. Okay, we'll get you checked out at a hospital, but your helmet probably saved you from a lot worse. Native shot a glare at Stain. That guy is way too dangerous for anywhere other than Tartarus. He deserves everything the law can throw at him, Virtus said, voice full of venom. I heard something about your brother during the fight. Native frowned as he examined Virtus' costume. He wouldn't happen to be Ingenium, would he? I heard that he was on the mend. You're both lucky. Virtus nodded, but didn't mention the vigilante that had saved Tensei's life. There was too much going on to bring that up right now. Well, that was certainly a show, Shigaraki mused. Good teamwork, and the Midoriya kid had a form that neutralized the hero killer's skills and equipment. You seem pleased, Kurogiri noted. I mean, yeah, the hero killer could have lived up to his name a bit more, Shigaraki admitted, but the plan was to get him caught or killed, so I'd say tonight is going well. In fact, I think we can complete a bonus quest while we're here. And how will we do that? Just wait and see, Shigaraki said, his grin wide enough to be seen around the hand over his face. Guys, some heroes are on their way, Deku announced. They'll be here any. Triumph saw it first. Logically speaking, he knew that his delayed reaction was a combination of pain, coming down from the adrenaline, and just plain inexperience, but he would regret not acting, and could only shout, "Look out!" Before Deku could register the warning, a blur flew down from the sky and snatched him up. He yelped in fear as strong claws gripped his arms. The flying Namu had grabbed him in a way that prevented him from using the Ultimatrix, and he was helpless. Deku, don't move. Even in the grip of the monster, Deku felt his fear vanish when he heard Hawk's voice. The winged hero swooped down with a double kick directly into the Namu's exposed brain. The shock of the high-speed impact was enough to loosen the Namu's grip, and Deku slipped into the open air. He didn't fall far, because a handful of feathers hooked under his hood and gently lowered him to the ground. A moment later, the defeated Namu crashed to the street in a heap, and Hawks landed next to his intern. His wings were half the size of what they once were, but other than that, Hawks looked none the worse for wear. Ouch, Hawks muttered, I'm gonna have some bruises on my feet for that move. He turned to Deku. You okay, kid? Why yeah, I'm fine, Deku said shakily as he got to his feet. Thanks, Hawks. Hawks grinned and was about to speak, but the sound of clapping got everyone's attention, from students to pro heroes. Standing on the edge of a nearby rooftop was a familiar face to anyone who had been at the USJ incident, or had been briefed about it. Well, look at that, Shigaraki called down mockingly. You self-righteous heroes managed to catch Stain. It only took you months, and how many of you did he kill or maim before that happened? The League of Villains, Deku said under his breath. They are behind this. Hawks detached more of his feathers and prepared to launch them at Shigaraki, but then he saw the portal behind him. Fast as Hawks was, he wasn't fast enough to stop Shigaraki from taking that single step back to safety. Instead, he settled for waiting and watching, taking in every detail for later examination. You might have caught Stain, but you haven't stopped anything, Shigaraki continued. His ideals live on in the League of Villains, and we won't stop until this world is purged of anyone who can't live up to what a hero should be. He pointed down at the growing crowd of heroes, while several nearby civilians who hadn't been able to get away from the chaos pulled out phones and recorded everything. The League of Villains is coming for you all. Enough of this. Endeavor, who had just arrived on the scene, drew back his arm and hurled an orb of fire at Shigaraki. It was far too late, and Shigaraki was warped away long before the flames reached him. As if a switch had been thrown, all the heroes let out a sigh as the tension drained out of them. All that was left was the cleanup. All right then, Hawks said nonchalantly, though Deku could see the tension in his eyes. I guess that's it for tonight. Word of the incident in Hasu City spread like wildfire across Japan, but it was especially poignant for the hero community. For most, they were happy that the man who had killed so many of their colleagues had finally been captured, though everyone was waiting impatiently for the details. For several young interns, one of the details that had been released had them all on edge. Hero killer captured after an attack on pro-hero native, and UA interns under Manual, Hawks, and Endeavor. Ishido had freaked out right in front of Sky Dancer, and only calmed down a little when her mentor all but ordered her to call her friends and see if they were okay. Zero had turned in early, but knew he wouldn't be sleeping for a while after the news hit his phone. Asui had been on a late-night mission with Selkie, and had turned off her phone. She didn't find out what happened until the next morning, when she listened to a near-hysterical message from Ishido. Yaoyorozu had been about to retire for the evening, when Ruku had calmly but urgently asked her if she had seen the news. When she found out that 3 of her friends had been taken to the hospital after a fight with the hero killer, she feared the worst, and her fingers slipped several times as she tried to call one of them. Uraraka had been in the middle of learning a kick from Gunhead when one of the man's sidekicks ran into the dojo and hurriedly turned on the television. Uraraka felt more nauseous than after using her quirk on herself and practically begged Gunhead to let her find out what had happened. To the rising star's frustration and mounting panic, they couldn't contact their 3 friends until the next day. "Alright, Todoroki-san, just don't do anything strenuous with your right shoulder for about a week, and you should be completely fine." Todoroki nodded and put his shirt back on. "Thank you, doctor. No need for that." The doctor turned to the next patient. "As for you, Ida-san, your concussion was indeed minor, but head injuries must always be taken seriously. You should be fine, but if you notice anything strange over the next few days, such as headaches for no reason or sudden dizziness, go to a doctor again as soon as possible." Ida bowed, though he did so much slower than normal. "I understand." "Thankfully, Midoriya-san, your injuries were only superficial." The doctor smiled at Midoriya. "Just some bruises on your arms, and those will heal in a few days." He shook his head. "I've treated plenty of heroes in my career, but if you 3 can keep your injuries at this level, you'll have long and healthy careers ahead of you." The boys had been brought to the same hospital as Native. The pro hero had suffered the worst injury, with a deep gash across one shoulder, but he would recover. Still, even after the doctors had said that the boys' injuries were minor, the students' mentors had all insisted that they stay the night. Todoroki mentioned that it was probably a way for the adults to keep them in one place while they spoke to the police. All 3 of them had spoken to detectives and given blow-by-blow accounts of the fight with Stain, since they had received permission from their mentors to use their quirks if necessary, and a life had been at stake. None of them were in trouble for fighting a villain without even a provisional license, but they were asked to keep quiet on the details for now. So, Todoroki waited until the doctor left, and then looked at his friends. "We're telling the others, right? Are you sure?" Midoriya asked. "The police said not to talk about it." Todoroki shrugged. "I might not have been friends with them as long as you, but I'm pretty sure they'll be worried sick. Do you want to lie to them about this?" Midoriya felt a surge of guilt. He had already been lying to them about having a quirk, and the thought of lying further was unbearable. "I really don't," he said. "Nor do I," Ida agreed. "Then we'll tell them, as long as they don't spread it further." Todoroki leaned back in his hospital bed. "They probably already know that something happened. I vote that Midoriya tells them we're fine." A mischievous light flashed across Ida's face. "Seconded." Midoriya shot Ida a betrayed look, and then a pleading one at Todoroki, but the 2 boys gave him no sympathy. "Have fun," Todoroki said. "I'm sure at least one of them will be hysterical by now." The door slid open, and 4 people walked in: Manuel, Hawks, Endeavor, and a man the boys didn't recognize. He looked human from the neck down, but he had the head of a beagle. "Hello, boys," the dog man said. "My name is Tsuragami Kenji, Chief of Police. First of all, I'd like to express how pleased I am that none of you were seriously injured." Woof. The 3 boys as well as Ben stared at him. Woof. Yes, Asui had her ribbit thing going on, but they had all thought she did that because it was cute. Apparently, it was biological, if Tsuragami was any indication. "Second, we've come to a decision regarding the Stain incident." Tsuragami's face made it hard to read his expression, but he looked reluctantly accepting of something. "None of you are in trouble for your actions. You were under orders from your mentors to assist where necessary, and you took appropriate steps. Had there not been someone in danger, and if you had just tried to fight instead of running away, we would be having a very different conversation. However, you are still students, and we don't want others your age to think they can go up against hardened criminals without a license. As such, you will not be credited with Stain's capture. Because of the burns Stain suffered, Endeavor is being given the credit, and no one will be the wiser." Todoroki looked at his father. Endeavor was obviously annoyed with being rewarded for something he didn't do, but he understood the necessity of it all. Hawks, on the other hand, looked far too amused at the older man's discomfort, then kept coughing into one hand to avoid laughing. Manuel nervously glanced at the other heroes and inched back when Endeavor sent Hawks a withering glare. "You do have permission to tell your families, provided that they not say anything," Tsuragami went on. "But I ask that you refrain from doing so until after the press release later today." Woof. "Aside from that, while I cannot say anything officially, I want to thank you 3 for what you did to bring Stain to justice." With that, the police chief left, followed by Endeavor after he gave his son a quick once-over and a brief nod. "Hey, kid," Hawks patted Midoriya on the shoulder. "We're gonna spend the rest of your internship at my office. Just because you're not in trouble doesn't mean you're off the hook. Besides, I've gotta let my wings regenerate for a couple of days to get back up to 100%. Hawks' diminished wings flapped once to emphasize his point. "You'll be discharged within the hour, so we'll head back then." Good, then he has enough time to let Uraraka know that he's okay, Todoroki said, his expression stoic, though his tone hinted at his amusement. She's probably worried sick. Hawks did a double take between Todoroki and Midoriya, and finally lost the battle to control his laughter. Izuku, are you okay? Midoriya held the phone away from his ear as Uraraka practically shouted. Why yes, we're all fine. Todoroki needed a few stitches and Ida has to take it easy for a few days, but nothing was too serious. Good, that's good. Uraraka took a steadying breath that sounded like static over the phone. What about you? Were you hurt? I know you could heal yourself, but I just got a couple of bruises on my arms, Midoriya said, trying to put as much confidence in his voice as possible to help calm her down. I didn't even need to use swamp fire. At least Midoriya was getting practice in reassuring people. He had already called Ashido, Yaoyorozu, Asui and Shiro to let them know that everyone was fine. Ashido had cried in relief once she found out that everyone was fine. Shiro had demanded details which Midoriya couldn't give until later. Asui had started apologizing for not calling sooner, and Yaoyorozu had fussed as much as possible over a phone call. He had also called his mother and had dealt with her crying over the phone for a good 10 minutes before she calmed down. He had put off calling Uraraka for last because, well, he couldn't come up with a good reason other than he didn't want to hear her sound so worried. How do I do this? He wondered. What would All Might do? Wait, I don't think acting like All Might is going to help. Too bombastic. Maybe act like Hawks. No, he always sounds like he's trying too hard to be casual. Ben appeared next to him. He couldn't read his mind, but the hologram gave him a knowing look. Just be yourself, buddy. Just be Izuku. Okay, Achako. Midoriya's voice was soft and kind. We're all okay. I promise. You can see for yourself when we get back to school. Okay. Uraraka's voice was small and fragile, but no longer on the verge of hysterics. Thanks for letting me know, Deku-kun. I've gotta go. Gun had told me to come back inside as soon as I talk to you. Sure thing, Achako. I'll see you in a few more days. In the corner of his eye, he saw Hawks pointing at a non-existent watch on his wrist. Looks like Hawks wants to get going. Try to have some fun, okay? Yeah, okay. Now, Uraraka sounded a little amused. Bye, Deku-kun. Nice job, Hawks complimented after Midoriya hung up. You got her to calm down without sounding condescending. Lots of heroes have to work on that. IW was just telling her the truth, Midoriya said nervously. No one was badly hurt. His eyes suddenly went wide. Today W was my first time talking to G-girls on the phone. Hawk's grin had long since reached shit-eating levels. That's adorable, kid. Come on, I'll buy lunch on the way back, you earned it. Shigaraki leaned back in his chair and smiled. It had been less than 24 hours since Stain had been captured, and already his underworld contacts were setting up meetings for him. Dozens of villains now believed that the League of Villains shared Stain's ideals, and since Shigaraki had claimed that Stain had been part of the League, well, they weren't exactly clamoring to join up just yet, but they were taking him seriously. That was an excellent performance, Tamura. You only lost a few disposable pawns in exchange for eliminating a rival, and gaining both newfound respect and potential recruits from the villain community. Shigaraki bowed towards the TV. Thank you, Sensei. I do have one question, however. There was a pause as Shigaraki's master thought. You had the flying Namu try to kidnap the Midoriya boy. Explain your reasoning. I had a couple of reasons. Shigaraki started to pace back and forth. First, people are going to ask why I tried to take him specifically. Maybe he sees the kid as a threat. Or even better, maybe there was a darker reason. People assume the worst possibilities, so maybe they thought I think Midoriya could be a villain. Whatever the case, if I can get the heroes to doubt the kid, even a little, that'll help us in the long term. You're trying to erode the pedestal society will no doubt place him on. I'm impressed. What was your other reason? Shigaraki grinned. I had a theory about his quirk, but I had to test it to be sure. Now I know how to beat him. Not good enough. Ryukyu roared as she smashed through the mines Yaoyorozu had set up to block her. A moment later, the intern was snatched up in the Dragoon hero's massive claws. And now you're dead. Yaoyorozu hung her head. I'm sorry, I can't use anything too dangerous for training, but what else am I doing wrong? Ryukyu put her down and then turned back to her human form. For starters, you're not as focused as you were at the start of this week. She held up one hand when Yaoyorozu started to protest. You're worried about your friends, and that's why I'm not that upset. You're young, and it's better to learn from this when no one was seriously hurt. Still, now that you know that they're fine, you need to center yourself again. I understand. Yaoyorozu bowed and accepted the bottle of water that Hado tossed her way. What else can I do to improve? Now, Ryukyu smiled. It's quite simple. While your strategies are varied in what you create, they're still one-dimensional. You're only targeting me from the front. I gave you plenty of time to set up traps, and you tried that, but only in the direction I was coming from. You could have set up timed explosives or other traps that could have impeded my movements, but on my sides, or even from behind if you timed it right. When I use my quirk, it's hard for me to turn quickly when I charge. You also kinda fall apart when your plan doesn't work, Hato added. You should be more flexible. When Yaoyorozu thought about it, her mentor was right. Everything she'd done in training, the USJ attack, and the sports festival had all been responses to frontal attacks. With enough time to prepare, she could set up attacks from a dozen angles. Her only limit was her supply of lipids, and her own creativity. I'll let you think about that while you get some food, Ryukyu said kindly. After you're done, I want you and Nejire to spar for a little while. She gave her older intern an amused look. No quirks this time. You still need to work on close quarters combat. Sure thing, Hato chirped, and then hooked her arm around Yaoyorozu's. Come on, I'll show you where Ryukyu keeps the chocolate. Some dragons hoard gold, Ryukyu hoards sugar. Hey, that's mine. Ryukyu chased after her interns, who giggled as they ran. It only took a minute for the chase to end, but by the end, Yaoyorozu had cheered up significantly. Then again, it was hard to be anything but cheerful when Hato put her mind to it. So, any word from Izu-kun? She asked as they ate. Not since yesterday, Yaoyorozu said. He told us that he made it back to Hawk's agency, but that's it. It's the same with Todoroki and Ida. Hato pouted. It's not fair. You get to hang out with him and all your friends every day, but I can only see Izu-kun once a week. After getting to know the older girl a bit more, Yaoyorozu had discovered that Hato was almost incapable of being serious. She was less wild when they'd gone on patrol, but she approached everything with almost childlike glee. Actually, we don't really hang out that much, Yaoyorozu said. Most of our time is focused on schoolwork, though we try to spend Sundays at my house. Hato frowned as she tried to balance a cookie on one finger. Yeah, that's one of the downsides of being a hero. It's so hard to just kick back and have fun with friends. It's always work, 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 all the time. Seriously, Mirio and Tamaki are two of my best friends, but we have to work super hard to spend time together. I suppose that's the price of being a hero, Yaoyorozu said. No, Hato stuffed the cookie in her mouth and shot to her feet. No, we're gonna be different. We're gonna be heroes who make the world so safe that we can spend a whole weekend with our friends if we want. Yaoyorozu had to admit that that sounded nice. As much as she wanted to be a hero and improve society, her thoughts would drift to the times she and her friends had relaxed at her home. Reading, joking, watching movies, everything people didn't expect hero students to do. But she had so much fun with her friends, and she was determined not to lose that. Well, if that's our goal, she said and stood up next to Hato, then we'd best become the greatest heroes we can be. Hato grabbed the other girl in a hug and spun her around. Yeah, both of them blushed when their stomachs growled. But first, let's finish lunch. Cellophane panted heavily as he swung after Airjet. The Buster hero was putting him through his paces, but he knew that it would only make him stronger in the long run. It's good to be back here, Airjet said as they landed on a rooftop. This is near where my old agency used to be. Yusutafu is a great place for newer heroes to patrol. The crime rate is low, even by Japan's standards, and the area is beautiful in the spring. You know, Cellophane paused and took a sip from his water bottle. My friend lives around here. He told me that he used to see you around his neighborhood before you moved. That friend wouldn't happen to be one of the kids attacked by the hero killer, would he? Airjet asked. Actually, yeah. Zero leaned over the roof to look at the people below. Some, who had noticed the pair, waved up and shouted greetings. One person in particular, however, caught his eye. Hey, Airjet, that lady doesn't look like she can see very well with those grocery bags in her face. Airjet followed his gaze. Good eye, Cellophane. I'll let you handle watching over her. Just make sure she gets across the street okay, and ask if she needs assistance. Will do. With a leap and a strand of tape, Cellophane swung down to where the woman in question was reaching the crosswalk. Excuse me, ma'am. The woman was pretty and looked fairly young, but she wore clothes that wouldn't have been out of place on Ciro's own mother. She also had hair that was a familiar shade of green, and eyes that were unmistakable. If this lady isn't related to Izuku, I'll eat my helmet. He never mentioned a sister, though. The woman angled herself so that she could see him around the bags of groceries she carried. Oh, I didn't realize we had a new hero in the neighborhood. Cellophane shook his head. Sorry, I'm just an intern right now. I was just wondering if you needed help crossing the street. It looks like it's hard to see with those bags. The woman smiled. That's so thoughtful of you. I'd appreciate it. My apartment is only about half a block away, if you don't mind the walk. Cellophane glanced back at Airjet, who waved him off. Shouldn't be a problem. He even offered to take one of the lady's bags, which she allowed, and they started walking. I don't know if you're allowed to tell me this, the woman said after they crossed the street, but are you a UA student? I'm just curious, because my son goes to that school. At that point, Cellophane had been all but convinced that this woman was related to Midoriya, but he was surprised that she was his mother. She looked too young. I am a UA student, he confirmed. Your son wouldn't happen to be Midoriya Izuku, would he? The woman smiled brightly. He is. Do you know him? He and I are in the same class, actually. Cellophane bowed, a little awkwardly with the groceries in his hands. My name is Shiro Hanta. It's a pleasure to meet you, Midoriya-san. Inko tilted her head in thought, but then her eyes dropped to his elbows. He could see something click. Oh, I saw you during the sports festival. You did very well. Thanks, Midoriya-san. Cellophane chuckled. At least I made it to the final event. And that's more than most students can say in the first year. As they walked, Inko's smile dimmed. I hate to sound like a worried mother, but have you heard from Izuku about what happened in Hasu? He told me he was fine, but the police weren't letting him tell me details. Sorry, I don't know much. Cellophane had tried to push his worries back, but faced with his friend's mother, they returned with a vengeance. All I know is that everyone came out okay. Izuku was the least hurt, I think, and the worst injury just needed a few stitches. Inko let out a breath. Well, at least he's fine. I know he's capable of a lot, but I still worry. I get it, Cellophane assured her. After what happened, I got a bunch of calls from my mom, and I wasn't even in Hasu. Well, that's our job, Inko said. Even when our boys become pro heroes, we're still going to worry. Note to self, Cellophane thought. Make sure Izuku talks to his mom about everything. She's trying to act strong, but I can tell she's about to freak out. A few minutes later, the pair arrived at the Midoriya home. Cellophane waited patiently outside, while Inko dashed back and forth to bring in the groceries. Thank you for your help, Inko said when they were done. If this was just your first time training to be a hero, then I think you'll be wonderful when you graduate. Cellophane blushed behind his helmet. Thanks, Midoriya-san. I have to get back to Airjet, but I'll tell Izuku I ran into you, he'll flip. Inko laughed and waved as he jogged off. Tell him I'm making pork cutlets when he gets home. It's his favorite. Sure thing. Cellophane smiled to himself. If this is how it feels to just help people, I can't wait to be a pro. Alien Queen spun gracefully out of the way as the branch of the tree cracked and fell. As she came to a halt, she caught the kitten that was falling right behind the branch. A few civilians who had watched it happen clapped and cheered. Nice job, Alien Queen, Sky Dancer said as she hopped down from the tree. That branch shouldn't have snapped like that, though. The intern handed the kitten to its owner, a little girl that hugged the animal tightly and thanked her before running off. What do you mean? Sky Dancer tapped the tree with one finger. It looks pretty healthy, but the branch broke as soon as I put my hand on it. It could be that it has a bacteria that's weakening the wood. When we get back, we'll submit a report to have an expert check it out. I'd hate to see all the trees in this park get sick. Alien Queen had already liked Sky Dancer, but as they patrolled, she found herself respecting the woman a great deal. Sky Dancer was friendly and outgoing, but she was very responsible in her duties as a hero. I approach being a hero like I do with dancing, she had said when Alien Queen had commented about it. It's fun, yeah, but it's also a lot of work. Being a hero is like mastering a dance routine. If you miss a step, it can throw the whole thing off, and you have to be the very best to recover without anyone noticing. Another thing that Alien Queen liked was how easily her mentor explained everything. Ashido wasn't the best student, especially when the lessons were boring, but Sky Dancer had made almost everything relatable to dancing somehow, and that made it fun. It also didn't hurt that it kept her distracted from worrying about her friends who had nearly died. Sky Dancer must have seen something in her expression, because she put a hand on her shoulder. You okay? Still thinking about your friends? Yeah, she sighed. I know they're okay, but it's so annoying that they can't tell me the details yet. Sky Dancer nodded. Right now, just be thankful that nobody got seriously hurt, and Stain is finally off the stage. She smiled teasingly. Hey, you mentioned all three of those boys were cute. Any of them really catch your eye? Alien Queen smiled. All four of the guys in our group are cute. Midori is adorable, but he's totally off the market. Even if he doesn't know it yet, I'm pretty sure Tsu has dibs on Shiro, so he's not an option either. Ida's got a jaw that could cut glass, and Todoroki is that sexy loner type. Sounds like you've got options, but you didn't answer my question, right? I'm not really sure. I guess I'm just window shopping right now. Yeah, she'd had a crush on Kirishima for a little while. But even though that boy was her friend, he was even more oblivious than Midoriya, so she wasn't sure about those feelings anymore. Well, let me give you some advice on that front. Sky Dancer skipped a few times through the air before landing again. Don't make any hasty decisions, but when you do find the one you want, don't let them go if you can help it. I almost made that mistake when I met my partner. During the time spent in Sky Dancer's office, Ashido had noticed a ring sitting in a bowl on her desk. It was apparently an unwritten rule that heroes shouldn't take that sort of thing into the field next to a picture. It was of Sky Dancer herself, but in regular jeans and a t-shirt, next to a shorter woman with dark hair and glasses. The two looked very happy together, and Sky Dancer made sure to tap the ring every time she left the office. She'd explained that it was like a lucky ritual, and a promise to come back. Then again, Sky Dancer went on, and ruffled her intern's hair. You're too young to start thinking about this stuff right now. Hey, since our patrol is almost over, why don't we grab some ice cream on the way back? It'll make writing that report less boring, and then I can show you a few moves before calling it a night. Alien Queen grinned. Sounds great. Froppy didn't think of herself as a violent person by nature, and she certainly wasn't someone who vented her frustration through violence. But tonight was different. After all the perceived guilt of not finding out about her friends getting hurt until the next day, she needed an outlet. Fortunately for her, she got her chance when the drug smugglers were in her sights. They had tracked the smugglers to a larger ship earlier, but when Selkie had investigated it, he and a few of his other sidekicks had been trapped in the ship's hold. Rather than ask for help and waste time, he had sent the rest of his team, including Froppy, after a smaller boat that was trying to get away. Too bad for the criminals, they had been found out. The first one was knocked out with a swift kick to the head. The second she put in a sleeper hold, and a third was dragged with her tongue into the waiting arms of one of Selkie's sidekicks, an imposing man called Water Runner. Serious, Selkie's first mat, the SEAL hero, insisted on using nautical terms for everything in his agency, was impressed. Good moves, she whispered, but you might want to be aware of how much force you're using. Froppy nodded. Angry as she was, she still kept her self-control. Right? Sorry, Ribbit. Serious, a kind young woman with blue hair and a sailor-themed costume that Froppy had bonded with quite easily, smiled. Don't worry about it. This is why you're here, to learn. Now, we just need to check the smuggler's boat for anyone we missed. As if on cue, a mass of tentacles blew open the door to the ship's lower deck, straight at Sirius and Water Runner. The sidekicks were facing Froppy, and hadn't seen the attack coming, but Froppy did. She pushed Sirius out of the way with her hands, and Water Runner with her tongue at the same time. Unfortunately, that left her wide open. Two tentacles, both tipped with fists, smashed into her stomach. The air was forced from her lungs, and she was driven into the rocks the smugglers had been hiding behind. Froppy, Sirius glared at the octopus man who emerged on the deck. Get him. The two sidekicks charged. Sirius managed to get a couple of quick blows off on the man's face, while Water Runner tangled with the tentacles. However, Water Runner took a face full of ink, and then both he and Sirius were smashed to the deck. Froppy thought she heard a bone break. Stupid heroes, the villain spat. You take down my crew, you face the consequences. He glared at Froppy, who was still catching her breath. Shouldn't you still be at school, little girl? Shouldn't you be in a bad pirate movie? Froppy shot back. The villain's tentacles reared back as he registered the insult. The opening was only for an instant, but that was all Froppy needed to shoot her tongue right into his eye. The villain staggered back and clutched at his face. Arg, you little, I'll kill you for that. I have to disagree. Both Froppy and the villain turned to see a humanoid seal dressed in a wetsuit on the other side of the ship. His arms were crossed, and his expression was stern. Froppy allowed herself to relax, just a little. Now that Selkie was here, she had no doubt that this would be over soon. Except that she saw one of the villain's tentacles reaching for Sirius, intending to use her as a hostage. Froppy and Selkie moved at the same time. The former's powerful legs let her tackle Sirius out of the way, while the latter put his fist in the villain's other eye. A few more punches, and the criminal was out like a light. Excellent work, everyone, the pro hero said as they tied the smugglers up. Sorry it took me so long to get here, but escaping that trap took a while. Froppy made sure the knots she'd been taught were secure before taking her eyes off the smugglers. But how did you know where we were, Ribbit? Two things. Selkie held up two fingers and grinned. First, I know these waters well. These rocks were the best place to hide until daybreak. Actually, this isn't the first time I've caught criminals here. The reason it isn't heavily patrolled is because we use it to trap smugglers. The second reason is that each of my crew has a homing beacon that I can track underwater, those pins we all wear. It pays to be prepared. Froppy had seen the identical pins worn by everyone in Selkie's agency, but only now realized their significance. She nodded. Maybe I should do something like that with my friends, Ribbit. Sirius, who was tending to the injured water runner, looked at her. The ones who were attacked by the hero killer, right? Did you get any more news about them? Just that they're out of the hospital. I was really worried about them, Ribbit. Your compassion is admirable, Froppy, Selkie said. However, there's something you should know about being a hero. This job is dangerous, yes, but we train extensively to deal with it. It's perfectly fine to be concerned for your friends' well-being, but constant worrying is a distraction you can't afford in the field, and a disservice to them as heroes. You need to trust them to handle things, or at least make it out of a crisis alive. Froppy took the man's words into consideration. She did respect and trust her friends, and everyone had walked away from the Hasu incident in one piece. Instead of beating herself up about this, maybe she could view it as a learning experience. Seeing that what he'd said had made an impact, Selkie brought his hands up to his chin and smiled goofily. Oh, goody. Please don't do that, Captain, Sirius groaned. How many times do I have to tell you that it's not cute? For the first time in days, Froppy smiled. Todoroki meditated in the training room, completely focused on the flames shooting up from his forearm. The fire was held at about 6 inches tall and more uniform, rather than a raging inferno. His goal was to maintain that kind of control until his skill with fire was as great as his ice. This kind of exercise was the only thing Endeavor allowed him to do for the rest of his internship. He had insisted that his son work like that because he was still healing, and Endeavor had to speak with the press about his defeat of Stain. Had the man been anyone else, Todoroki would have thought his father was being overprotective. Finally, after almost an hour of practice, Todoroki was bored. He cut his flames and pulled out his phone. It wasn't like there was anyone else around to tell him no. However, only one of his friends was active, so he set up a private chat. He could have simply texted, but he was too used to the messenger app at that point. Snowflake, hi, Mina, are you free? Crayon, dude, how are you doing? Todoroki had the tiniest smirk on his face. Ashido was a little more exuberant than he was used to, but she was easy to talk to. Snowflake, I'm fine. I'll have my stitches out by the time we get back to school. I had the worst of it, so Izuku and Tenya should be 100% recovered. How about you? Crayon, it's been great. Sky Dancer is awesome. We saved a cat in a tree today. Then we had 2 write reports cause the tree was sick. Snowflake, that sounds interesting. Aside from the Hasu thing, all I've done is train. Crayon, boring. Snowflake, I know. Have you heard from anyone else? Crayon, why Shoto, a pretty girl is paying attention to you. Don't tell me you are not interested. Todoroki had been prepared for this. He had known Ashido long enough to know that she liked to flirt, and had come up with a plan in case she turned her attention to him. Snowflake, oh, I just figured you and I were meant to be. Crayon, Ahodson WTF. Todoroki's smirk widened. Snowflake, I mean, look at our hair. You're pink, I'm red and white. It's perfect. Crayon, STAHP. The world is going sideways and I don't know how to handle it. Crayon, are you messin' me? Snowflake, a little. Turnabout is fair play, and I wanted to see what your reaction would be. The fact that she was cute had absolutely nothing to do with it at all. Honest. Crayon, my revenge will be swift and terrible. Snowflake, I'm sure it will. Crayon, fear me. Though he didn't realize it, Todoroki had a true smile on his face. It was small, but it was genuine. His new friends, and he was amazed how quickly they had gone from Midoriya's friends to his friends, were the best entertainment he'd had in years. Hiya, oof. The small group of sidekicks winced as Uraraka got up and dusted off her hands, while her opponent remained on the mat. He was stunned and breathless after the suplex Uraraka had given him. Nice work, Gunhead commented. The setup for that last move took a little long, but it was well executed. Uraraka beamed. Thank you, sir. Gunhead wasn't done. However, showy moves like that are really only good for tournaments, or if you're durable enough to power through any counters your enemy might make. A good punch to the kidney is just as good, and much faster to pull off. Besides, you need to grab your opponent with both hands to do that, and if you hit him with your quirk, it reduces the effectiveness, because you're not using his own weight against him. He paused, and then addressed the entire room. Also, who taught her how to do that? The man on the floor wheezed and held up a hand. Okay, yeah, you deserve that, which is why I'm only giving you 10 laps after you get your breath back. Uraraka's smile vanished. I'm sorry, I was just asking around to see if someone could teach me a really powerful move. That's fine, and I approve the initiative to learn. Gunhead's mask hid his face, but Uraraka imagined he looked stern at that moment. However, I'm here to teach you efficiency and how to survive. That was the point of those disarming moves. Even if you do become good enough that you can afford to show off, I recommend against it. All it takes is overconfidence and a thug with a knife or a gun, and that's it. He shrugged. That's why so many heroes lost to Stain. I know a lot of them, and they were cocky. At least Ingenium took the hero killer seriously, which is probably why Stain didn't kill him. Mentioning Stain removed what remained of Uraraka's good cheer. The Hasu incident had scared her even more than the USJ attack, even though she hadn't been close to the danger. If anything, finding out secondhand that her friends had been attacked had been far worse than if she'd been there in person. Gunhead patted her on the shoulder. If you take nothing else from this internship, remember to treat each fight like your life depends on it. Even if it doesn't, someone else's life could. There's no place for showboating when lives are at stake, and any hero who says otherwise doesn't deserve the title. He spoke up for the entire room again. Okay, everyone hit the showers. Uravity, you stay behind for a minute. Sorry again, sir, Uraraka began, but Gunhead cut her off. How are you feeling? He asked, not unkindly. About your friends, I mean. You were pretty worried when you talked to that boy on the phone. Achako, hi, it's me. Are you okay, Izuku? Uraraka's voice cracked as she interrupted her friend. Yes, he had called only a few minutes after getting back to Hawk's agency, but she was still worried after that first call from the hospital. Why yeah, I'm fine. Nothing's changed since last time. Uraraka took a deep breath. Good, I just wanted to be sure because now I can be absolutely furious with you. What? The hero killer? Uraraka ground out. You know what he's done to experienced heroes, and you picked a fight with him. I didn't have a choice. Midoriya paused for a moment. I'm sorry, I can't tell you everything right now, but I promise that I had a good reason, and I'll explain everything when I see you. You'd better, or I will send you into the sun. Or kiss him, a traitorous part of her mind thought. Uraraka shoved that away for now. She was supposed to be mad at him. He had definitely scared a few years off her life. I'm really sorry, Achako. Midoriya sounded like he was about to cry, which was not fair in Uraraka's opinion. I guess all of you are upset with us, huh? I'm sorry we worried you. Definitely not fair. Look, Deku-kun, we're only upset because we were scared for you guys. I mean, you're one of the best friends I've ever had. And then I heard that you were attacked by a lunatic who kills heroes. Uraraka sniffled. Now she was on the verge of tears. This is not how our first year of high school is supposed to go. I'm sorry, Midoriya said again. Cut it out, she said. Just we're gonna be upset. But then we're gonna be happy you're okay, alright. Yeah, okay. Midoriya paused. I think I need to go. See you at school. Uraraka rolled her eyes as if that was actually in question. Yeah, I'll see you in a few days. Bye, Deku-kun. Bye, Achako. After she hung up, Uraraka leaned back against the nearest wall, and she rubbed at her stinging eyes. Of all the boys she could have had a crush on, it had to be the one who got into the most trouble. Uraraka blushed at the memory. Gunhead had been right outside and had heard her half of the conversation. I guess I'm still a little rattled, she admitted. I think I'll feel better when I see them in person. Gunhead nodded. That's usually the case, especially with close friends. He gasped and brought a hand over where his mouth would be behind his mask. Or is it that one of them is more than a friend? Uraraka managed to blush in embarrassment and giggle at the same time. Gunhead had the tendency to act like a schoolgirl whenever they weren't training, and it was adorable. Probably because it was so out of character for a man who looked like he ate entire platoons of soldiers for breakfast. We're just friends, she said. Gunhead scoffed. Please, I've known pro heroes that have been teams for years, and one only gets chewed out like that by their significant other, or someone who wishes they were. Uraraka's face grew hot enough to catch fire, but didn't say anything. Oh, that's so cute. Gunhead giggled, but then became serious again. Here's another bit of advice for you. Both in life and as a hero, don't have any regrets. You got a scare when someone you care about as more than a friend was in serious danger. You don't want to live your life without telling him how you feel. With that, Gunhead left, but Uraraka hardly noticed. She had a lot to think about. Keep stretching out that hand, Manual advised. Carpal tunnel isn't fun. Why can we not just type all of these reports? Ida asked as he massaged his hand. Wouldn't that be more efficient? Manual waved his own hand in a so-so manner. Kind of. The Public Safety Commission likes to have digital and physical copies of each incident report. For some reason, they want handwritten and typed physical copies, and we'll both have to sign everything in triplicate. It feels like heroes are doing more paperwork than actually helping people, Ida complained. That's not true, Manual said. However, as government employees, we have to uphold the bureaucracy. He smirked. Also, your brother called and asked that I give you some kind of punishment for being so reckless. He suggested cleaning the toilets for the rest of your internship. We compromised by having you do all the paperwork. Ida wondered if there was any way to fight Stain again. It had to be less of a hell than this. Good work, kid, Hawks called out lazily as he watched Jetray fly through a series of hoops, held aloft by some of Hawk's feathers. Keep your turns sharp, and remember that you'll have to trade speed for accuracy. You'll want to keep that acceleration up as soon as you finish the turn. Got it, Jetray shouted back as he pulled up and into what was less of a loop and more of a square. Time, Hawks glanced at the stopwatch on his phone. 8 seconds to complete the course. Did the package survive? Jetray looked at the egg held with one of his feet. I think so. Wait, no, there's a crack. We'll try it again one more time before the internship is over. Hawk sighed. Okay, pack it in for now. You're almost at your time limit, right? As if on cue, the dial on Jetray's chest began to blink red, and he quickly landed on the roof before he turned back to normal. Your maneuverability is getting there, Hawk said. I'm not worried about your overall speed, though. Short of someone with a warp quirk, Jetray might be the fastest thing on Earth. If Ben hadn't been in recharge, Midoriya was sure he would have laughed. Is there anything else I can do today? Always so eager to improve, aren't you? Hawks chuckled and led his intern inside. Take it from me, appreciate the relaxation when you can. Midoriya smiled. When I'm the #1 hero, and villains are too afraid to even think about committing a crime, then I'll relax. Thinking about taking All Might's place, huh? Hawks reached out and ruffled the boy's hair. And surpassing me, I don't want to take All Might's place. Midoriya's answer surprised Hawks, and if the way the boy blinked was any indication, he'd surprised himself, too. All Might isn't something I want to be. I mean, I want to save people, but I never saw myself as the new symbol of peace or anything. I just want to help people. And I want to make a world where we don't need some savior to fix everything. He suddenly started flailing his arms. I don't think All Might isn't amazing. And I appreciate what he did for Japan. But, I get it, Hawks interrupted gently. All Might pulled us out of a dark time and into a place of light. But now that we're here, where do we go? Is that where you're getting at? I think so, Midoriya said. I guess what you said about creating a world where heroes have too much free time really stuck with me. Hawks smiled. It wasn't his usual half-fake smile that he gave to reporters and civilians, and it wasn't his teasing smirk. Instead, it was genuine happiness. And here I thought I'd never be the one to inspire people, he said, and patted Midoriya's back. All right, that's enough mushy stuff, let's go get something to eat. When the internships ended, Midoriya was reluctant to leave. Hawks was a surprisingly insightful teacher. He was especially helpful with Midoriya's aliens that relied on speed or ranged attacks, though he also helped him with his slower aliens by showing how a fast opponent could beat them, and vice versa. Thank you for all your help, Midoriya said after he finished packing, and bowed. And for saving my life. No problem, kid. Behind Hawks, Taker rolled her eyes and flicked him. Oh, what was that for? Show a little sincerity, boss, Taker scolded. I am being sincere. It took me literally 2 seconds to save him. Taker reached out and grabbed his ear. Oh. Okay, let go. After using a few of his feathers to push Taker away, he smiled at Midoriya. Seriously, though, you were great this week. If you ever need a referral or something, call me. Oh, and if you don't somehow get your own agency immediately after graduating, I'd be more than happy to take you on as a sidekick for a while. It'd be nice to have one who can actually keep up with me. Midoriya wondered if he was about to faint. The #3 hero in Japan had basically just offered him a job, and he wasn't even done with his first year of high school. He bowed again, much deeper this time. Thank you, he managed, and started to leave. Hey, kid. Midoriya. Hawks gently grabbed his shoulder. Hang on a sec, I want to give you something. Taker handed the boy a small, unmarked box, and winked. He called the manufacturer 5 times to make sure the measurements were perfect. Yuki. Hawks whined. Don't tell him that. Gotta keep you humble somehow, sir. With trembling hands, Midoriya opened the box. His eyes went wide when he saw the contents. Inside was a visor exactly like Hawk's, but tinted green instead of yellow. To him, it was more than just sharing a piece of gear. It felt like Hawks liked him enough, respected him enough to declare that Midoriya was associated with him. I had them change the color, Hawks muttered, and Midoriya swore he sounded embarrassed. Green seems to be more your thing, right? Hey, I have an idea. Taker pulled out a camera. Midoriya-kun, why don't you get back into your costume and give the add-on a try? And you two can have a picture together. Yeah, why not? Hawks grinned at his soon-to-be former intern. Do you mind? Not at all. Midoriya grinned back. Can I show my friends? Hawks watched from his window as Midoriya got into the cab that would take him to the train station. His smile was long gone now. Instead, he looked almost sad as he thought about the boy's future. I hope he keeps his head down after this, he thought. He's probably got too much attention on him already, and not the good kind. Hawks, Takeda stood next to him. Gone was her energetic smile, replaced instead with grim apathy. The board wants to speak to you. Damn it. Of course they do. Hawks sighed. Can you at least tell me if this is about the kid? Only partly. Takeda Yuki alleged anti-hero, but actually an operative for the Hero Public Safety Commission. And Hawk's handler held out a nondescript cell phone. For now, there's a mission regarding the League of Villains. You'll find more in the briefing. Hawks grabbed the phone with slightly more force than was necessary. He was about to turn it on, but a thought occurred to him. Hey, Yuki, what do you think of the kid? I mean, really think of him. Do you think he'll be a hero? Takeda shrugged. It depends if he lives long enough. If you want to help him along, the commission certainly won't stop you. But what do you think about him? Takeda met his gaze. Hawk's expression didn't change, but his wings tensed when he saw the unfeeling look in her eyes. Though she still had the name, Takeda Yuki wasn't home at the moment. Her quirk and other personality, soldier, had taken over. He noticed a slight rippling underneath her clothes. She'd seen his wings move, and her own quirk was ready to counter him. Hawks didn't take it personally, as befitted her other half. Soldier was trained to view any quirk activation as a potential threat. The worst part was that Takeda herself had no idea that Soldier had an ulterior motive. She actually bought the story the Hero Public Safety Commission had cooked up for her own history. I think he'll make good bait if you fail in your mission. Hawk's neutral expression morphed into something more determined. Then I won't fail. Soldier smirked, though there was none of the playfulness she had as Takeda. That's the spirit. After a long train ride, Izuku finally got home. He had barely made it through the door when his mother tackled him with a hug that drove the air from his lungs. Izuku, she wailed, and then spun him around, inspecting every inch of him. Are you okay? Did the hero killer hurt you? Why didn't Hawks take care of you? After everything stopped spinning, Izuku gently interrupted. I'm fine, Mom. Stain didn't even scratch me. Well, that's not technically true, Ben said. I mean, he cut you in half. A few times, actually. Inko looked between her son and the hologram. Cut him in. Cut him in. Oh dear. Thankfully, Izuku was able to catch her before the unconscious woman hit the floor. Ben, that didn't help. Ben winced. Sorry. Midoriya made sure to arrive at UA nearly an hour early, where his friends were waiting. Sorry I'm late. My mom was still really worried and, whoa. Todoroki and Ida stepped back to avoid the rush of 5 bodies crashing into their friend. You absolute idiot. Yaoyorozu shouted, even as she tilted his head one way, and then another as if looking for injuries. How could you be so reckless? Yeah, man, you scared us half to death. Shiro added. I felt horrible for not finding out sooner, Ribbit, Asui said. Never do that again, Izuku. Ashita was crying as she hugged his arm. If you ever want my forgiveness, you'd better buy me ice cream. At that point, Midoriya was about as flustered as he could get, though Todoroki and Ida were similarly stunned. They had been subjected to the same treatment just a few minutes earlier. The 3 boys knew that their friends weren't angry at them, but they had spent most of the week holding in what they'd wanted to say, and now it was all coming out at once. Only Uraraka didn't shout or berate Midoriya. Instead, she just hugged him and rested her cheek on his shoulder. One of Midoriya's arms was still being tugged at by Ashido, but his other arm was free to hold Uraraka close. Her hair smells nice, he thought as his head leaned against hers. Like strawberries. I'm okay, he said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. We're all okay. There was a flash of green light, and 2 people stepped onto the beach. We have to hurry, the girl said. We don't have much time. We have enough time to do this right, the man assured her. We can grab him after school. No need to get the entire planet riled up. Screw this planet. The girl punched a piece of junk and shattered it into pieces. All that matters is the Ultimatrix. You heard Azimuth, we have 24 hours. Yeah, and he said that the prognosis becomes less certain every minute we delay. Let's just grab the watch and get out. The man gave her a piercing look, and she took a few deep breaths. Are you good? Because I can do this by myself. I'm good. The man nodded. All we have to do is wait for him to go somewhere isolated, and we can grab him without witnesses. Worst case scenario, we knock him out and take the watch. Can we make that our first option? The girl grimaced at the trash all around her. And do we have to hang out in this garbage? You've walked through sewers, stop complaining. The man glanced at the sun. We've got a few hours. Get ready, because we might only have one shot at this if diplomacy fails. We can't fail, the girl insisted. Dad is counting on us. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 5. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author the incredible Muffin on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.